Honourable members, the Deputy Speaker.
Are there any constituency statements by members? I call the member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The benefits of sport are well known. Sport improves our physical and mental health and teaches important values like teamwork, discipline and respect. A positive experience of community sport can be transformational, and for our kids, it can lay foundations they carry for life. But the reality is not everyone has access to sport. The costs and time involved in playing team sport, being part of a club, paying for uniforms, committing to practice and travelling to and from games simply isn't an option for many families. That's why I'm a fan of Team Sports for All, an organisation that supports kids who otherwise couldn't be part of club life. It all started on Bluff Road in my electorate of Goldstein in 2007, with a few parents from the Hampton Rovers Football Club banding together to cover the costs for some kids whose families couldn't afford for them to play. From these humble beginnings in Bayside, Team Sports for All is now operating across the Melbourne metro area, with programs tailored to help address the barriers facing children and families who are underrepresented in sport. And I'm so pleased that Team Sports for All is about to scale further after receiving substantial funding through the government's Play Our Way program, which seeks to provide greater opportunities for women and girls to access, participate and remain involved in sport. Over the next 3 years, this funding will support up to 1,510 seasons of sport for girls from low-income, welfare-dependent families, with a focus on expanding the program into 2 new locations and specific programs to open doors for girls from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds to participate. Team Sports for All is all about addressing social isolation for the long term and doing everything possible to keep kids active in a sporting community as they move through all the challenges of growing up. This is particularly relevant to girls, many of whom stop playing sport in their teenage years. I commend the efforts of everyone involved in Team Sports for All, including their more than 60 volunteers. But there's more work to do if sport is to be truly equal in Australia. That's why I'm fighting for female-friendly change rooms across Goldstein and specifically at the Sandringham Football Club at the landmark Trevor Barker Oval. Currently, there's only one open space for players to get changed in, which has 1 toilet cubicle, an open urinal and no private showers, just 4 shower heads side by side. With the dramatic rise in the numbers of girls and women playing AFL, this setup is outdated and inappropriate. Girls should not have to get dressed in their car to play sport. While we work towards this, I congratulate Team Sports for All and encourage further support for their efforts in bringing more of our kids off the sidelines and onto the field. Thank you.
I call the member for Cooper, Assistant Minister for Health and Aged Care and Indigenous Health.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Now, this morning I wish to highlight two recent important moments for my constituents of Cooper. On Friday, October the 18th, I was greatly honoured to be invited by the Palestinian community to a vigil hosted by PARA, the Palestine Australia Relief and Action Group. PARA helps Palestinian migrants and refugees live safe, happy and fulfilling lives in Australia and is led by Australian Palestinians. Their mission is to feature and strengthen Palestinian voices and to help newly arrived Palestinians settle in. The town hall at Collingwood Town Hall was decorated with 15,000 kites created by the PARA community to honour the memories of people who have been lost in the conflict and the trauma that lingers on. There was hardly a dry eye amongst us as we learned about their strength, resilience and struggles, of loved ones being torn apart, of futures stolen. Prior to this vigil, I met with some of the families PARA support and I heard about their homeland and what their lives were like before they left. We shared a wonderful meal together at the Preston Market. For many of these families, it was the first time they'd connected with others who have had to flee Gaza, together rebuilding their lives in our community, seeking a life of peace and prosperity. These people are human, no different from you and me. They are doctors, IT specialists, students and teachers, their mothers, fathers, daughters and sons. But among the stories of horror and heartache, we heard hope, hope for a better life. This is an issue that everyone in this place knows I feel very strongly about. It's an issue that I know my constituents feel strongly about, and I'm proud to come from a community that welcomes refugees with open arms, because together we are stronger. And secondly, Deputy Speaker, I'd like to congratulate the Year 12 graduating classes of 2024, including some of whom I had the pleasure of getting to know over the last few years at Preston High School. The school has continued to thrive since opening in 2019, and I want to make special mention of Sean Butler, the principal, and Jessica James, the assistant principal, who've built the school from the ground up. Last month, I welcomed my friend and former Prime Minister Julia Gillard to the school to open a new building that the students voted to name in her honour. It's called the Gillard Building and houses the Tony Birch Library, science labs, art and design studios and multiple classrooms. We also caught up with the Jed Carney Scholars, a group of wonderful young women I mentored to develop their leadership and change-making skills, our future women leaders. Preston has brought up some of the brightest students I've ever met, and I can't wait to see what these graduates will go on to achieve. I pay tribute to teachers across the entire government school system, especially those in my electorate. Thank you.
Can I call the member for Indi?
Thank you, Speaker. Last week, I spoke to a woman in my electorate whose story has stayed with me. Cherie lives in a 2-bedroom house with her husband and 3 neurodiverse children in Wodonga. The high cost of living and the additional costs of care and support for her children mean Cherie's family are in severe financial stress. They now face a 10% rent increase, which they simply can't afford. Their search for a new rental is fruitless, knocked back in application after application after application. Cherie told me that we are trapped in this constant cycle of renting and moving every year. We will never be able to give our kids stability or a permanent home. Speaker, I wish I could say this was an exceptional story, but it isn't. That's why I'm working every single day to put forward practical solutions in this place that will help families in my electorate to find a stable home. For more than 2 years, I've been working for greater Commonwealth investment in the enabling infrastructure we need to unlock more housing. I knew this is where we should focus because it's what I heard from families trying to build new homes, from local governments trying to unlock more housing, and from the builders and developers ready to break ground. As the independent member for Indi, I have taken stories like Cherie's and the experiences in my region and created policy solutions that would meet those needs, specifically to open up more land for housing, to open up more land with water connections, power pavement poles. So I welcome the Coalition's recent announcement of a Housing Infrastructure Fund, which mirrors my calls for a $2 billion regional housing infrastructure fund. It's why I welcomed the government's housing support program when it was announced last year, just 1 week after I put my infrastructure plan to the Prime Minister. The good news is we now have both major parties singing to the same tune and understanding that if we're going to solve this housing crisis, it's going to start with more pipes, paves and poles. It also shows the crucial role of the crossbench in driving forward the policy debate in this country. From the housing debate to integrity to the energy transition, the crossbench is working constructively with industry, experts and the community to put forward practical and ambitious policies that address the challenges we face as a nation. I can't stomach it when the major parties pay politics over housing. It does nothing to help people like Cherie and her family. It's why every single day I'm working hard with my community to deliver solutions that will help more Australians into stable and secure homes where they and their families can thrive.
And call the member for Burt.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Access to a good education can set you up for life. That's why we're making it easier and more affordable for more people in our community, no matter what career you're looking to get into. In our community, more than 16,600 people have had their student or apprenticeship debt slashed this year by the Albanese government. And so I'm pleased to let you know that that wasn't a one-off. It's being locked in, with the announcement yesterday that a re-elected Albanese government next year would wipe 20% off your student debt. That includes student debt for TAFE or university, as well as for apprentices. It will mean uni students in our community will have about $5,500 taken off the average university HECS help debt. Only an Albanese government will also raise the repayment thresholds, so you won't have to worry about repaying your student loans until you're actually earning a decent wage. But that's not all. In Western Australia, almost 20,000 people have had the opportunity to experience the Albanese government's fee-free TAFE. That's been life-changing for so many in our community, having the chance to skill up or retrain into a career that they want. We want to see more tradies available to build homes, more apprentices getting a start, more healthcare, disability, aged care and childcare workers looking after our loved ones and training for people who dream for a job on the mines, with more opportunity to get ahead. And that's why only a re-elected Albanese government will be making that permanent, locking in fee-free TAFE into law. The Albanese government is delivering for our community. We've slashed inflation to an almost 4-year low. We've worked with WA Labor to deliver a $700 energy bill relief for every household, and we've increased the subsidy for childcare and are capping childcare fee increases. We've also made medicines cheaper for you. We're continuing to work hard each and every day for you, moving forward with a new bulk build Medicare urgent care clinic, 2 Medicare mental health centres and infrastructure projects like the extension of the Armidale line to Byford, the upgrades to Tonkin Highway and the grade separation at Nicholson Road and Garden Street. I'm proud to be delivering for you and building a better Burt and building Australia's future. I want to take the opportunity also to give a massive shout out to the local legends who once again pulled off an awesome Kelmscott show. This year we celebrated 125 years, the longest running agricultural show in Western Australia. Congratulations as well to my mum, a long-running Kelmscott show competition entrant who got a first for her beans and a second for her cardigan, as well as to my son Nicholas, who took out the Honey Joy competition. Congratulations to all of the winners, to all the dedicated volunteers who pulled it off, everyone who supported the show and came on down to have a great time.
Call the member for Groom.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And a quick round the grounds from the Groom electorate, which I know you'll agree and all assembled members know the best part of Australia is in our great Darling Downs. Speaker, we had the Jacaranda Festival out at Goombungee back again. It's been 2 years, a great day out, thousands of people lining the streets. It's great to see so much attention and money pumping through that local economy. You keep those small towns alive. Quick shout out to Tom at the Pioneer Arms Hotel, Speaker. I did order a half pint. He upgraded me to a full pint, but I did pay for it and didn't ask for it, Speaker. Quick joke there for Tom and I. Beef City turns 50. Red meat is such a huge part of our local economy. We went out there for the celebrations out there. A really great story from Beef City. Their first ever account was with Japanese Agriculture Department, providing red meat to Japan. After the Second World War, Japan were keen to make sure they never had the food shortages they had again. We've played a key part in that, and Japan has been a great investor in our region, both Beef City, Oki Beef, and as well the Ackland Coal Mine. So look, a great day out there. Congratulations to everyone who's been involved over a long time. W Coffee & Co. in the Australia Arcade, right just down, a little bit too close, Speaker, to my office. They had their soft launch of their cocktail evenings on a Friday night. The best espresso martinis in Toowoomba is the claim. Look, I think they're pretty good. Congratulations to Geordie. I'm going to give a quick shout out to, right across the arcade, for Dead Ringer Records. A great little shop that's expanding, that's growing, got a great selection of records there. I picked up Eurythmics Touch, 1983 classic for $20. Get in there and support local business. It's so important that we see those arcades growing. Toowoomba Women's Shed, I went out there. We often talk about the men's sheds. The women's shed in Toowoomba is absolutely fantastic. I walked in on a slow day. There was 25 women in there working on all sorts of things that are needed across our community, from school bags to things used in hospitals to give people a little bit of little extra comfort, to Christmas gifts, the whole lot, blankets, wraps for kids. It's fantastic to go in there and see so many women working so hard and enjoying each other's company. It's a great thing. We also farewelled Chancellor of Uni SQ, John Dornbush, this week. He has served 3 terms as our Chancellor. 25 years he's been on the council. He's given so much to our community and we thank him very much for his service. Also this week, we heard that the Vice-Chancellor, Geraldine McKenzie, will be moving on. Geraldine, thank you so much for everything that you've done for Uni SQ, not just in my electorate, but across the broader region. Particularly want to point out the $50 million you got in iLaunch funding, the biggest investment that Uni SQ has ever had from any level of government. Geraldine, you played a huge part in that. We thank you very much. Look, loads of love start up this week to Gus Romero and all the guys who are involved in that. Thank you for that great community initiative, putting food on the tables of people in need across Christmas. And last one I'm going to shout out is Smithy's Gym has a big fight. Look, Jackson Griffiths, Stone Lee as he fights under, up against Miguel Vasquez. This should be a great fight. Great night out, Friday night at Rumours International. Be there.
The member for McNamara.
Thank you very much, Acting Speaker. I recently met 4 incredible student leaders from St Kilda Primary School, which is one of the very best schools in our local community. And these young female leaders are a true credit to that fantastic school. Each submitted to the Raise Our Voice campaign with answers to the question, what do you want your community to look like in the next 10 years and what can the next Parliament do to achieve it? But it was their collective vision for the future of St Kilda, for the future of our St Kilda community that made their presentation so powerful. So I've taken from each one of their contributions a piece to be able to read here in this chamber today. Tess wrote about our wonderful community she sees on the way to school and what she hopes to see in the future. The walks improve day by day because every day our community improves. There's less rubbish, more nature, people bicycle to and from work, cars are becoming less common, locals greet each other as they pass because we have no reason to be separated as a community. We finally understand that we are all on this journey together. I think that is a wonderful sentiment from Tess. I dream of it, that every future step we take will be forwards and never running backwards. Iris and Hannah wrote about the need for open space for our children and community to thrive. Around 80% of children that live in St Kilda live in apartments with only 5% community space. For those reasons, St Kilda Primary School needs a new hall. It would significantly help because not only would it host important events for the school, but children would run food drives, op shops, charities, and migrant families could take lessons in English. And Stella wrote passionately, echoing her fellow students' call for a community hub. We have research saying that 60% of Balaclava and 81% of St Kilda live in apartments. That means lots of people around our area don't have much outdoor space. That's where we come in. It will be awesome for kids' mental health and physical health. It won't just be for the kids. Everyone around us will also have the opportunity. Stella ends with, even though I may not be there, I would love to have contributed to this journey. And I think that is a wonderful sentiment from Stella, of her advocacy, even though after she leaves St Kilda Primary School, that the work that she seeks to have for that school is one that future students will enjoy. So I say thank you to Tess, Iris, Hannah and Stella for sharing your visions for for the future with me, and we will get to work to try and make them a reality.
Member for Lindsay.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you to everyone in our community involved with Pink Up Penrith, particularly the dedication of the committee led by Gai Hawthorne of the Penrith CBD Corporation. This month-long initiative in October has once again shown us the power of community spirit in supporting a cause close to everyone's hearts, raising funds for the McGrath Foundation to support breast care nurses. Over the last few years, Pink Up Penrith has raised an extraordinary $362,000, allowing 5 McGrath breast care nurses to be stationed at Nepean Hospital. These nurses play a vital role in the lives of patients and their families, providing not just medical expertise, but compassionate care, guidance and hope during what is often the most difficult time in people's lives. It is because of these dedicated community efforts that the people of Penrith can access these 5 wonderful nurses. This year, to help spread the important message of early detection, I was really proud to join Penrith CBD Corporation to sponsor special breast cancer awareness decals, which are perfect to stick on the doors of bathrooms, in shops, in gyms, in hotels, and I've loved seeing them popping up at venues right across Penrith. Thank you to every small business and community member for being involved in this initiative. Pink Up Penrith hosts a series of events that demonstrate the community's unwavering commitment to the McGrath Foundation's breast care nurses. Among these was a high tea at Lakeside Restaurant, and I had the privilege of joining a room full of passionate and generous individuals, including the director of the McGrath Foundation, Tracy Bevan, who has given a lot of her time to supporting this cause in Penrith. We've also had the United in Pink dance event organised by Rebecca from Paws, and it had a whole evening of wonderful dance schools participating, not for competition, but for community. And this was wonderful, the amount of money that our local dance schools have raised. The work of the Pink Up Penrith Committee, led by Gai, deserves the highest praise. Organising such a wide array of events is no easy feat, yet every detail is always meticulously planned and everything goes off wonderfully. Most of all, it is about people in our community giving generously. The total funds raised this year are yet to be finalised, but I'll know there'll be a figure that reflects the effort that's been put in. To Gai Hawthorne, to the Pink Up Penrith Committee and every volunteer and participant, my deepest gratitude is extended to you all. Your dedication reminds us that together we can make a difference.
So, Member for Hasluck.
Deputy Speaker, we live in a world where global interactions are part of everyday life. We're used to watching events from across the world in real time, and it's easy to make quick, careless observations. Each story only takes a minute or so of screen time. But it's never been more important to understand each other deeply. In October, I was part of the Global Dialogue exchange program to India. The Global Public Policy Institute, based in Berlin, in partnership with the Australian National University's National Security College, brought together German and Australian parliamentarians for trilateral meetings, including meeting with India's Minister for External Affairs, Dr. Jai Shankar. The program is generously supported by the Robert Bosch Foundation. Dr. Jai Shankar has an immensely impressive career serving as India's ambassador to both China and to the United States. He offers a perspective that we need to consider carefully and seriously, advising in 2022 that Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems. And to this end, in our meeting, he spoke frankly about the positive refocus to the Indo-Pacific. I take this as a reminder that we are all interconnected and need to understand this and our different perspectives. Australians particularly need to understand the importance of India as one of the fastest growing economies and soon to be the 3rd largest economy, and where even within my own electorate, the language of Punjabi is the 2nd most spoken, with Gujarati not far behind, and how we capitalise on the brain chain that exists now between our nations. Throughout the week, we discussed maritime security, emerging technology, climate, as well as regional issues of concern. India is also an extraordinary democracy. On sitting in their new parliament, I was struck by the fact that each of India's 543 members of the Lok Sabha the House of the People, serves up to 2.5 million constituents. It's a beautiful, fascinating country. We visited the Lodi Gardens, a city park in New Delhi that presents a microcosm of India's extraordinary history, with Hindu and Islamic architecture that has learnt from and influenced each other. I first visited India at the age of 16, and I continue to be struck by its immense variety. It has elements that we are so familiar with, such as cricket, as well as ones that we simply must observe with wonder, and I hope with intense curiosity. Deputy Speaker, how and when do we work together? How do we understand each other better? For all of us, it was a lesson in respect, the respect that comes from listening and learning and embracing the challenge of difference rather than shrinking away from it. For when we look at each other squarely and honestly and with respect, our relationship will grow.
Call the member for Nichols.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Just in the nick of time. Deputy Speaker, I had the great privilege of attending the Greater Shepparton SPC Business Excellence Awards last week. It was a great event that celebrated the entrepreneurship of the business community in the Greater Shepparton region and in the Goulburn Valley more widely. I just want to share with the House and with everyone some of the winners of that event, of the Business Awards. Firstly, Waters Electrical was inducted into the Business Hall of Fame, a famous company in Shepparton which does great work, and credit to all the team and their owner, Robin Naggs. J&B Modular Buildings won the Excellence in Innovation. James Lelliott from Goulburn Valley Health and Janika Mendoza tied for Young Professional of the Year. They're doing amazing work in the Greater Shepparton region. Sonia Strawn, the dedicated prostate cancer nurse at Goulburn Valley Health, won Excellence in Customer Service, and she's been doing amazing things helping people who are going through that prostate cancer process. Flavour Wright won Excellence in Food and Agribusiness, great grower of greenhouse tomatoes and other vegetables. Greg Pearson Building and Brett Collins Refrigeration tied for the Excellence in Customer Service Trade Services. And having used Greg Pearson Building before for a renovation a number of years ago, it was a wonderful experience, a great local business. The Museum of Vehicle Evolution won the Visitor Experience of the Year, and if you want to see a great display of trucks and buses, go to Move in Shepparton. Elsewhere at SAM, the Shepparton Art Museum won Excellence in Customer Service. Trellies Outdoor won the Best Marketing and Advertising Campaign. Everyday Supplies won the Excellent in Business Retail Services. Game Traffic and Contracting won the Excellence in Businesses Trade Services. A wonderful local marketing company called So Creative, Olivia and Steph, won the Excellence in Business Professional Services, and they do an amazing job. Tricon Electrical Group won the Emerging and Micro Business of the Year, and Xavier Hutchison from SPC won the Apprentice Trainee of the Year. These businesses and people are really what makes the Goulburn Valley tick. We're very proud of our entrepreneurial spirit. We're proud of the people who get out there and have a go and use their creativity, their skills and their education to try and drive business forward. And there were many nominees and all deserving, but the people I've just mentioned were the winners. I think we need to do more to acknowledge our small businesses and our businesses in the regions. They really do drive our economy along, and it's wonderful, particularly to see young people who are starting businesses or getting involved in bigger businesses like Xavier Hutchinson starting out his apprenticeship at SPC, get the recognition they deserve. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Member for Canberra.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On Saturday, the 26th of October, I attended the C of X Memorial at Western Park in Canberra with the Memorials Association, ACT, for the 23rd anniversary commemorations of the C of X tragedy at the memorial. The memorial honours each of the 353 asylum seekers who lost their lives with a dedicated pole representing each life lost. Of course, this is the tragedy that occurred in October 2001 in international waters somewhere between Australia and Indonesia, where a vessel carrying around 400 asylum seekers capsized. 353 people died, the majority of them women and children. And this memorial in Western Park stands to honour those lives, but it's also a monument to the compassion of the Australian community
And the effort that went into establishing that memorial and to caring for it is a really powerful symbol of that. The memorial itself includes the 353 poles. There are taller poles representing adults who lost their lives and smaller poles representing children. And they are arranged so that one part of it actually shows the actual size of the boat that all these people were on, and you can stand in there and just can only imagine how that many people would fit into that tiny space and the terror that they experienced. But each of the poles has been designed, each of the poles has artwork on it by a school or an individual or a community organisation or a church from around Australia. And I just want to pay particular tribute today to the C of X Memorial Association, ACT, for the work they do in maintaining that memorial. They have volunteers who come and mow the grass around the poles, but also have been restoring the art, and it's a really beautiful job that they've done. Too many to name, but I do want to name Paul Meyer, Lauren Honcope, and Sophie Singh and John Minns, who are also from the ACT Refugee Action Campaign, for the work they do there. And I'm very proud to represent an electorate that cares deeply about asylum seekers and refugees, and this is one of the issues that I first became politically active of, and I want to assure you again that it's something I'll always advocate for within our government. There have been a group of people meeting outside my office on Thursdays, and I was happy to meet with them and chat with them. They are particularly raising awareness of people caught in the fast-track process, and I just want to mention that here, that those are 10,000 Australians living in limbo at the moment, and this is something that I will continue to raise this issue within our government. Thank you.
Thank you. In accordance with Standing Order 193, the time for members' constituency statements has concluded, and I call on the clerk.
Private members' business, notice number 1, motion relating to animal welfare.
Can I call the member for Clark?
Deputy Speaker, I move the motion relating to animal welfare in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper. Deputy Speaker, I would add that cruelty to animals is something I've long stood against in this place because, like most in the community, we understand that animal cruelty is just plain wrong. It is, of course, also a shocking reflection on the ethics and character of those who inflict it or who turn a blind eye to it. Imagine the community's shock then when in 2013 the Abbott government abolished the National Strategy for Animal Welfare and its advisory committee, and the community's dismay when the consequence of that decision was that animal welfare standards became the sole preserve of the states and territories. After all, this is the level of government who've consistently done a terrible job safeguarding animals and clearly can't be trusted. So, Deputy Speaker, no wonder we welcome this government's commitment to at least re-establish an animal welfare strategy, with $5 million set aside for that purpose in the last budget. But it's only a small step and well short of the comprehensive national oversight needed, because we have drifted into an undeniable animal welfare crisis, and that's where we'll stay without reform. This crisis is particularly acute where commodification and profits intersect with animal welfare. For example, many in my home state of Tasmania are appalled by revelations, as recently as today, about conditions in the state's largest puppy mill, Tasmanian Labradoodles. Mercifully, a lengthy legal battle finally led to the RSPCA closing the mill in July and rehoming more than 250 dogs. But the reality is that many puppy mills still legally exist across the country, using dogs as breeding machines for profit, with some puppies fetching many thousands of dollars each. And in the process, the breeding animals are often deprived of even their own most basic needs and spend their lives in crates or cages, bearing litter after litter. Rarely, if ever, are they allowed out to run, play, or to curl up on the couch with a family. Deputy Speaker, another example of the crisis is the greyhound racing industry, where welfare issues are well documented and widespread, and clearly not the result of a few bad apples, as some would have you believe. No wonder my office is constantly contacted by members of the community who share my disgust with this industry and its appalling treatment of dogs. Frankly, shame on the industry for the outrageous levels of injury and death, physical overexertion, inadequate housing, lack of socialisation and environmental enrichment, cruel training practices, illegal live baiting, administration of banned or unregistered substances, and euthanasia of poorly performing or unwanted dogs. Indeed, just since lodging my notice for this motion last month, the number of reported on-track deaths this year has increased from 98 to 116, and track injuries have grown from 8,449 to 9,508. Moreover, 43, or 1 in every 6 dogs so-called retired from the industry in the last year, has been killed, which is appalling, and even more so when you consider that Australia has the largest greyhound racing industry in the world, and it is one of just 7 countries where it's still legal. But of course, the $4 billion waged annually on greyhound racing gives you a clue as to why governments have continued to turn a blind eye to this reckless cruelty. Now, Deputy Speaker, noting that the Melbourne Cup is tomorrow, let's not forget the horse racing industry, where 7 horses have died in the last decade running the Cup, and 1 horse is killed on an Australian racetrack every 2 days. And again, there's the issue of overbreeding, as illustrated shockingly in the case of Black Caviar, who, in the 10 years since her so-called retirement, was forced to bear 9 foals before becoming sick and being euthanased, which is not an unusual story. Broodmares routinely being constantly either pregnant, lactating or both for their entire breeding lives without any substantial rest and ending up with complex health problems. Indeed, mares in Australia are forced to bear around 15,000 foals each year, only about 30% of which ever make it to the track. All this is to say, Deputy Speaker, that we're in a crisis and that we should be working to fix it. That's why I'm moving this motion calling on the government to set up an independent Office of Animal Welfare, an agency which can take a leadership role in developing and overseeing animal welfare in Australia and bring the states and territories to the table to improve standards and to address this crisis. To do anything less, Deputy Speaker, is unconscionable complicity in ongoing cruelty. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Is there a seconder for the motion?
Yes, I second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. And I call the member for Hasluck.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I care about the welfare of animals. It is a vital part of being a responsible human being. It is a hallmark of understanding that special position of being human and the responsibilities that that entails. We cannot behave with reckless disregard, let alone cruelty, towards any being on this planet. Many parents try to teach their children about caring and mindfulness by guiding their interaction with their pet. Properly done, it's training in consideration, respect and tenderness. That tenderness should extend past the days of cuteness of puppies and kittens and past the days when an animal is an active investment. If you truly love an animal, you are alert to its suffering and do what you can to prevent it. I'm pleased to see this motion. We do need to remind ourselves on a regular basis of our duties in this space. The strength of animal welfare standards is a direct reflection of our nation's convictions about life on Earth. Carelessness or casual disregard also results in serious problems with regards, for example, to biosecurity, which is vital to Australian primary industries. The Albanese government supports strong animal welfare standards, not only because we believe in what people like to describe as humane attitudes on all sorts of issues, but because we care. The Coalition, including the National Party, took no commitments on animal welfare to the last elections. It must have slipped their minds. Labor did make election commitments on animal welfare, and we are delivering. Since we came to office in 2022, we have committed $5 million across the 4 years to the renewal of the Australian Animal Welfare Strategy. This strategy was last active in 2014. Not entirely coincidentally, that was 1 year after the Coalition came to power. The funding Animal welfare does need national leadership. Reinvigorating the strategy sends the message that needs to be sent both domestically and to overseas markets. The agreement between the Australian Government, state and territory governments, animal industries and animal welfare groups has to be regularly revised to ensure that we are achieving our goals in the light of the ongoing research and development. We do need a strong framework and a nationwide approach to animal welfare. So this funding we've injected into the Australian Animal Welfare Strategy will make sure that it has clear visions, priorities, and of course a set of practical actions. In its renewed form, it will address the needs of all animals, including livestock, aquatic animals and companion animals, as well as animals used for work, sport, recreation, research and teaching. The renewal of the Australian Animal Welfare Strategy is a job for those who believe in bringing people together, listening to each other and, of course, learning from each other. In a land in which we've seen the introduction of rabbits, followed by the introduction of foxes, not to mention cane toads, we understand that issues relating to animals' lives have to be considered very carefully, and they're never settled or set in stone. The Albanese government is demonstrating in real practical terms our commitment to an approach to animal welfare that is sustainable and is based on available best research and evidence. At the end of September this year, Dr. Catherine Clift was appointed as Australia's new Inspector General of Animal Welfare and Live Animal Exports for a 5-year term. This inspectorate was also created by this government. Dr. Clift will be undertaking audit and review functions aimed at strengthening animal welfare assurance in a way that is informed by the kind of broad experience that we do need. She grew up on a farm, worked as a rural veterinarian and has a deep understanding of the regulatory programs. As a Western Australian, I'm particularly grateful for her work already with the WA Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development. Western Australia is well on the way to addressing many of the concerns raised by the member for Clark. Puppy farming has been outlawed and there are progressive steps to correct the abuses in the racing industries. Believing in and demonstrating strong animal welfare standards is vital to our international reputation of our animal and agricultural industries, and it's important for us here at home. It shows that cruelty and casual disregard appall us. We can't shrug our shoulders at cruelty or callousness of any kind, anywhere. I thank the member for Clark for the motion, and I commend the work of Minister Watt and now Minister Collins and the department and staff who work to make life better, not just for us, but for the animals we live alongside.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for McKellar.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, like the vast majority of Australians, I'm an animal lover. As a child, my family regularly holidayed on our property near Trunky Creek, where I learnt to herd the sheep, drag them out for shearing and sort the wool. I helped them lamb, and I rode our half-wild horses around the property. We went to agricultural shows and rodeos, and we regularly cared for potty goats and lambs. Mum bred pedigree dogs that were showered with the love of a young family. But for a country which loves animals and which has relied on animals in so many ways over the centuries for transport, food, fibre, sport, to work on farms, for assistance and disabilities, and for companionship, there are far, far too many ways in which we mistreat them. The Australian Alliance for Animals recently stated, "The reality is our laws, standards and regulatory systems on the whole are failing animals. This is because within the current governance system there are conflicts of interests among those in power, inconsistencies across states and territories, loopholes in laws and standards that ignore science and community expectations." Let me talk about the widespread cruelty of one industry as an example, the greyhound racing industry. In 2017, following a damning investigation, the multi-billion-dollar Australian greyhound racing industry vowed to clean up its act. The investigation had exposed the preventable deaths of as many as 17,000 young dogs each year. Sadly, despite a short-lived ban, a former chief veterinarian has again revealed that widespread abuse continues in this industry, with dogs being raced at, quote, barbaric rates, euthanised without cause or left to rot in metal cages where they can no longer compete. Then there are the puppy farms. As the RSPCA describes, breeding dogs may be kept in overcrowded conditions or extreme confinement. Some never let out of cages. They may live in constant fear or stress, are never socialised and do not receive basic care such as exercise, grooming, vaccinations or the veterinary care they may need. There's not time to discuss in detail today the many other examples of animal cruelty being permitted to continue in Australia, including live animal export. State and territory governments have quite simply failed to do enough. And so it is to be commended that the federal Labor government is committed to releasing a new Australian animal welfare strategy. Australia has had such a strategy in the past, but in 2014, as Prime Minister, Tony Abbott withdrew funding and disbanded the Animal Welfare Unit within the Federal Agricultural Department. Just another example of another backward step. So it's pleasing to see this government take up the issue in its first term, albeit at a slow pace. The August 2024 report from the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry simply provides an overview of a first tranche of consultation designed to inform the renewal of the animal welfare strategy. It shows that there is much to do. And my electorate of Mackellar certainly expects action on this issue. Since being elected around 2.5 years ago, I've received hundreds of emails from constituents expressing profound concern about animal welfare. They have expressed their horror in relation to everything from live animal export to greyhound racing, from puppy farms to horse racing. Particularly topical given that the race that stops a nation is on tomorrow. And so I urge the government to act with alacrity to reintroduce an animal welfare strategy. And as the member for Clark is advocating in this place today, an important part of this strategy must be the establishment of an independent Office for Animal Welfare. Such an independent body is critical to minimise the influence of vested interests such as the gambling industry on decisions. Even in today's paper, it was reported that in the past decade, over $2.7 million in donations from the gambling industry have been made towards major political parties, the Liberal, Labor and the Nationals. Donations from the biggest companies involved in horse betting to the major parties increased from $66,000 in 2013 to $488,000 in 22-23, an increase of over 600%. This is precisely why it's essential that an independent Office of Animal Welfare be established.
I call the member for Canberra.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on this important motion brought by the member for Clark and thank him for bringing it into the Parliament. Australia has not had a government so committed to animal welfare as the current government, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. We believe in strong animal welfare standards and we believe that all animals should be treated humanely. And this is something that my constituents also care deeply about. In fact, one of the first and definitely one of the biggest letter writing campaigns I received in 2019 was about the live sheep export trade, and this was in the wake of damning evidence of animal cruelty in that industry. And I know that many colleagues from around the country have similarly had many constituents get in touch with them around this. And back then I wrote to the then Agriculture Minister, David Littleproud, calling on him to end this trade. I'm incredibly proud that it was a Labor government that was able to get this important reform through, something that my constituents demanded and that rank and file Labor members mobilised for across the country and that former Agriculture Minister Murray Watt was able to make happen. As the previous speakers have highlighted, this week we will see the running of the Melbourne Cup, the race that once stopped a nation. And while many Australians continue to tune in every year, a growing number of Australians do not feel the same excitement as they once did. Light has been shone on poor animal welfare outcomes in the racing industry, and a growing number of Australians no longer want to be part of this event. As this motion highlights, we've seen absolutely terrible outcomes for animals, particularly in the greyhound racing industry. This year, we've already seen almost 100 on-track deaths and almost 8,500 injuries. For horses, the story is no better. Between August 2021 and July 2022, 139 horses died. At least one horse dies every 2 days on Australian racetracks. In Victoria, the jumps raced industry still exists. Jumps racing is 20 times more dangerous to horses than flat racing. Every other state and territory has already banned this practice. In August of this year, 3 horses were killed during a single event. I understand the growing sense of community frustration with this industry, and so does our government. Since coming to power, we have strengthened our national approach to animal welfare. We're delivering on key election commitments and have committed $5 million to the renewal of the Australian Animal Welfare Strategy. Early this year, the government confirmed our commitment to jointly lead the renewal of the strategy, confirming our commitment to a modern, sustainable, evidence and science-based approach to animal welfare. We're demonstrating that Australia's strong animal welfare standards are important to strengthen the reputation of our animal and agricultural industries with trading partners and the community. Our funding will ensure that the strategy includes a vision, key priorities and practical actions. The final strategy is scheduled to be released in 2027. The renewal of the strategy will be undertaken in collaboration with state and territory governments and in consultation with industry and animal welfare stakeholders. This is in stark contrast to the Coalition. Unbelievably, the Coalition took no commitments on animal welfare to the last election, showing their complete disregard for the importance of strong animal welfare standards to the Australian people. And as the previous speaker, the member for McKellar, drew attention to the previous Prime Minister Tony Abbott actually abolishing that part of the department with responsibility for animal welfare, which is shameful. I am proud that Labor is taking a different approach to this, Deputy Speaker, and once again, I want to thank the member for Clark for bringing forward this important motion to the House today.
Thank you. There being no further speakers, the debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting. And I call the clerk.
Private members' business, notice number 2, motion relating to the education system.
And I call the member for Corangamite.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move the motion relating to the education system in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper. Deputy Speaker, as a former teacher in government schools and as someone who went through the government system at both primary and secondary level, I certainly want education, public education, to be the best it can be. It is where the majority of Australian families send their children to school. It's accessible to everyone and should offer the best standards of teaching and learning. But the reality is, to build a better and fairer education system, we need greater investment in public education. It's that simple, Deputy Speaker, and that's why our Education Minister has put $16 billion on the table to fairly and fully fund all schools. This would be the greatest ever increase in Commonwealth funding to public schools. The Albanese government recognises education is the most powerful catalyst to individual achievement, personal wellbeing and the prosperity of our nation. Deputy Speaker, over 10 years, our $16 billion proposal will pay for half of the 5% gap in school resource standard funding, with the states and territories paying the remainder. And we're working closely with the states and territories to make this a reality. Western Australia, Tasmania and the Northern Territory have already signed the agreement, but it's not a blank cheque. The dollars are tied to key reforms for students to catch up, to keep up and excel, and importantly complete Year 12. With this approach, we want to close the education gap. It was a chasm under the former Coalition government, who did nothing to increase educational standards. Deputy Speaker, reforms, targets and transparency at the heart of our agenda, which includes 3 priority areas: equity and excellence, wellbeing for learning and engagement, and strong and sustainable workforce. And to achieve these priority areas, the $16 billion of additional funding will be tied to the following reforms: Year 1 phonics checks and numeracy checks to identify students who need extra help; intensive supports such as catch-up tutoring to help students who fall behind; greater wellbeing support for students, including counsellors, wellbeing coordinators and mental health workers; attracting and retaining teachers and school leaders through rewards and recognitions; supporting our teachers and school leaders with quality curriculum resources developed in partnership with the teaching profession. Under these reforms, Deputy Speaker, by 2030 we aim to significantly improve the proportion of students completing Year 12 with an increase of 7.5% from 2022 rates. This will be the highest rate of Year 12 certification ever achieved. We're also investing in crucial school infrastructure, particularly in fast-growing areas like mine in the electorate of Corangamite in Victoria. And on top of the $16 billion proposal to achieve better and fairer education standards, the Albanese Labor government is investing more than $280 million through the School Upgrades Fund. In my home state of Victoria, $48 million is being provided for vital infrastructure projects. In my electorate, almost $260,000 in upgrades has been delivered to local schools as part of our Schools Upgrade Fund, including Drysdale Primary School, with $9,800 provided for new classroom IT equipment, Inverleigh Primary School, with $170,000 provided for an undercover basketball court, Mirrapora Primary School in Mount Dunedin, with $40,000 provided for football oval fencing, and Surf Coast Secondary College with $39,210 for outdoor fitness equipment. Deputy Speaker, the Coalition ripped billions of dollars out of government schools. This is their legacy. The Albanese government's legacy will be different. We are committed to funding government schools alongside the states and territories to make sure that we have a public education system that provides the best outcomes for Australian students and for our future prosperity. Thank you.
Is there a seconder for the motion?
I second the motion, reserve my right to speak.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Casey.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, a robust education system on educational outcomes and opportunities is the foundation of our society and the individual. As I said in my first speech, education is the foundation to create a great life. It is my fundamental belief that the crucial element in order to lift people out of poverty and to build a better life for themselves and their communities is a strong education system. A system focused on delivering tangible education outcomes for students to set them up for long-term success. And it is so important that we do all we can to lift student outcomes. And governments have invested billions in education. Unfortunately, results have been going backwards. And it's important that we provide parents with choice in their education of their children. And personally, I've been lucky to be raised by my mum, who was a teacher, is still a teacher in a public school. My wife is a teacher's aide in one of the local schools. And so I get to see, and I've seen firsthand, the impact that teachers and teachers' aides have on the students under their care. So I want to take a moment to pay tribute to all teachers aides, everyone in the education system. They give so much back for our community. And education is crucial. But unfortunately, Deputy Speaker, we have another motion on a Monday from the government that talks a big game but doesn't actually deliver when you dig down into the detail. And let's just use one example of the Minister for Education talking a big game but not delivering the actual outcome for students, for teachers and the community. In 2022, the Minister for Education promised that Labor would provide $68.3 million to fund up to 2,260 high-achieving teachers who'd be fast-tracked into classrooms most in need. And like always, big announcement, big hoopla about this important announcement. However, in September this year, the government quietly announced that it's going to spend $70.9 million, but it's only going to deliver 1,497 teachers. So it's hundreds of positions short of what was promised. It's clear they have no plan to address teacher shortages that are impacting communities right across Australia. And Minister Clare has been missing in action on urgent reforms needed, such as teacher training and including the explicit teaching of behaviour in the curriculum. But don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it that the federal Labor government are letting down the Australian people. Let's go to the Victorian ALP Minister for Education, Minister Ben Carroll, who is the Minister for Education in Victoria. And he was critical of the federal Labor government and their funding. And he was asked to clarify whether the previous coalition government had done a better job in funding public schools. And Mr Carroll replied that yes, they had. the Victorian ALP Minister for Education confirming that the former coalition government has done a better job funding public schools than the current federal Labor government. And again, we see on the table is in the motion. And the reason this money is on the table is because the government has not been able to land agreements with Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia and the ACT. We have a government again patting themselves on the back for the great job they're doing, but in reality, they haven't delivered for 5 states and territories across the country. And education is crucial. As I said, Deputy Speaker, to our community. I was lucky enough recently to visit St Andrews and Wonga Park primary schools, which are new schools in my electorate. It was great to meet with them. My daughter had fun making honey joys out of the recipe book from the Wonga Park primary school, and to meet with the principal, Julie. St Andrews school principals, Carolyn and Hayley, as well as the students when I went to visit, were busy serving and hosting the Seniors Festival High Tea, an example of how our schools connect with the wider community. And recently I had the opportunity to celebrate the Christmas Hills and the Wuriolic 150th birthday celebrations, a great testament to those communities and what they've given to our community. Christmas Hills in particular was special. It was a school that my mum spent over a decade teaching at. It's a small school, it's a great school, and that's why we've got to continue to back education outcomes in Victoria and across the country.
I call the member for Pearce.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I would like to thank the member for Corangamite for this motion that provides an opportunity to present a vision for an education system in Australia that is equitable and accessible for all students regardless of their backgrounds. The Albanese Labor government is committed to transforming education, ensuring every child has the opportunity to succeed. Our dedication is evident through an unprecedented pledge of $16 billion in additional funding for public schools. This funding aims to bring every school to 100% of its fair funding level by the Better and Fairer Schools Agreement. By collaborating with states and territories, we can ensure that all students receive the necessary support to thrive. As emphasised by our Minister for Education, funding is critical, but so it is what it is spent on. This agreement will link funding to reforms that enhance student outcomes and ensure that every dollar has a significant impact. Unlike others who might prefer a blank cheque approach, we are focused on funding the most disadvantaged schools first and turn that funding to effective reforms. In addition to this funding, we are investing over $284 million in school infrastructure through the Schools Upgrade Fund, which will create improved learning environment necessary for student success. In 2024, Commonwealth funding for education will increase from $27.8 billion to $29.2 billion, reflecting our commitment to quality education for all students. Currently, we are negotiating the Better and Fair Schools Agreement with states and territories. This agreement represents a crucial opportunity to tie Commonwealth funding to meaningful reforms. Minister Clare has highlighted consistently that nearly all new jobs will require students to complete school and pursue further education. Therefore, it is essential that we support students from diverse backgrounds and help them stay engaged in their education. We are focused on prioritising funding for the most disadvantaged schools first, ensure that our reforms help students catch up, keep up and complete their education. This agreement emphasises 3 key areas: equity and excellence, well-being for learning, and engagement and a strong, sustainable workforce. A significant challenge facing our education system is the ongoing teacher shortages. The Albanese Labor government has also launched a national teacher workforce action plan, which includes a comprehensive strategy. This will ensure every student can fulfil their potential benefits by linking funding to reform and effectively addressing teacher shortages. We are making strides towards achieving 100% fair funding for every school. Notably, Western Australia, Northern Territory and Tasmanian governments have signed the Better and Fairer Schools Agreement to allow them to reach this goal. For Western Australia, this entails an additional $777.4 million in public school funding from 2025 to 2029, ensuring full funding for disadvantaged schools by 2026. Additionally, we are allocating $203.7 million to the Student Wellbeing Boost, which supports students' wellbeing across all schools in Australia. This initiative underscores our commitment not only to academic success, but also to creating environments where students feel safe and supported. The Coalition's legacy in education has been marked by widening gaps and declining outcomes. The Productivity Commission reported that, under their governance, disadvantaged students were 3 times more likely to fall behind academically. Attendance rates dropped, high school completion rates declined, teacher shortages worsened, and disparities between advantaged and disadvantaged students grew significantly. And that's highlighted by the lack of only one speaker this morning on this motion. Our vision is clear. Through collaboration and commitment to these reforms, including addressing teacher shortages, we can create an education system that is equitable for every student. In conclusion, let us remember that the success of our students directly impacts the future of our nation. As a board member of 8 schools in my electorate of peers, I understand that investing in education and ensuring we have quality teachers is crucial for fostering a brighter future for all Australians, and I thank all the teaching staff and the teacher aides out in the communities. Together we can provide every student with the opportunity to reach their full potential and contribute meaningfully to our country's growth and its development. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Moreton.
I thank you, my hirsute Deputy Speaker, and I thank my good friend, the effervescent and ever-industrious member for Corangamine, for moving this motion, as it gives me the opportunity to reflect on the Albanese Labor Government's commitment and action on education. As a former high school teacher, education is a subject close to my heart. I'm looking forward to speaking in support of the Better and Fairer Schools Funding and Reform Bill this week. Education is the great transformational opportunity. Education has been a key priority for this government since the end of the antediluvian times back in May 2022. Our reform focus has encompassed the whole spectrum, from boosting support in the early childhood education sector through to enabling greater access to post-school education, from ABCs through to PhDs and everything between. Deputy Speaker, this focus was certainly needed when Labor came into government. After nearly a decade of coalition government, the sector was neglected, underfunded and underloved. Young Australians paid the price, with the Productivity Commission finding that the equity gap widened under the coalition's school agreement. To translate that in what that means, the LNP were white-anting our egalitarian society. This same schools agreement, the National School Reform Agreement, did not enable any public schools outside of the ACT to reach their set schooling resource standard, thus ignoring the economic and social benefits that Gonski said would flow from such investment. The former government's flippant disregard for the Gonski recommendations from 2011 meant that public schools across the country were underfunded. Remember, the schooling resource standard is an estimate of the level of government funding that a school needs to meet the educational requirements of its students. Remember, all students take baggage from their parents and homes to school. Some nice baggage, some horrible baggage, but all students carry some of their home environment through the school gate each day. Under the coalition, students from disadvantaged backgrounds were found to be 3 times more likely to fall behind. Over 85,000 students did not meet basic literacy or numeracy standards. As a nation that values learning, this is a shameful record. Deputy Speaker, you can trust a Labor government to take action on inequity, and that is what at the heart of the Better and Fairer Schools Agreement. It will replace the ineffective and damaging National School Reform Agreement at the end of this year and will run until the end of 2034. It invests $16 billion to meet Gonski targets and ensure fair school funding. That means every school achieving 100% of its fair funding level. Under this agreement, the Commonwealth will contribute half of that 5% gap in SRS funding, the biggest ever increase in funding to public schools, with the states and territories also contributing. Obviously, as their name suggests, state schools are run by states. The Minister for Education, Jason Clare, has already negotiated deals with WA, Tasmania and the Northern Territory, and this means that schools in WA and Tasmania will be fully funded from 2026, Northern Territory fully funded by 2029. This is ahead of the plan by 2 decades and entirely necessary to provide equity for children experiencing disadvantage. Minister Clare has said that this funding is not a blank cheque. Crucially, it's tied to outcomes-focused reforms. We want the community to have full transparency about how their taxpayer dollars are changing young lives. This means measures such as early assessment in Year 1 of phonics and numeracy to identify children who need additional support before they get left behind. Can I say, as a high school teacher, I definitely believe that a stitch in time saves nines when it comes to kids. The Better and Fairer Schools Agreement is also focused on shoring up strong and sustainable workforce. One of the first actions taken by Minister Clare was the development of the National Teacher Workforce Action Plan. Even in Moreton, an inner city seat, some of my schools still have trouble tracking down teachers. So this plan recognised 5 priority areas, increasing the number of teachers, strengthening teacher education at unis, retaining current teachers, elevating the profession to the respect and valued status it deserves, and mapping out future workforce requirements. This has translated into 4,000 additional uni places for studying a teaching degree and $56 million for Commonwealth teaching scholarships designed to attract enthusiastic and committed students. Deputy Speaker, yesterday I went to my good friend John Carroz's 60th birthday party. We met on my first day at Teachers College back in 1983. The table was full of teachers. John, Brendan, Fiona, Craig, Kylie, Rex, Liz. So we're all talking about a lifetime of teaching. John Carroza is an exceptional teacher at Quacky in Kelvin Grove. We're talking about what do we need to do to retain teachers and also inspire students at schools to go into the teaching career, a strong, noble career, something that my younger son has committed to doing, and I hope he fares well.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Bennelong.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. My first speech to Parliament, I made it clear to those who elected me and to those who are in the room that I wanted to be part of a government to help fix the imbalance in school funding. And my ask was pretty simple, Deputy Speaker. I want public school kids to have the same education and resources as those who attend independent schools. And today we know that the scales have been tipped heavily in the wrong direction. For far too long, public schools in Australia have been underfunded, and in New South Wales, the gap in the schooling resource standard has persisted. This gap doesn't exist as regularly for independent schools, and it has meant that students' access to quality education isn't the same. The imbalance we have, made worse by nearly a decade under the Liberals, has meant that students from disadvantaged backgrounds were 3 times more likely to fall behind, with 86,000 students across the country not meeting basic literacy or numeracy standards. And so, to address this gap, Labor has put $16 billion on the table over the next decade, committing to cover half of the SRS funding gap. This $16 billion represents the largest increase in Commonwealth funding to public schools in Australian history, ensuring that all students, no matter their background, have access to high-quality public education. And our ask is pretty reasonable, Deputy Speaker. The states who are responsible for the delivery of public education can fund half, and the federal government will step up and fund the other half. And for the first time, our federal investment is tied to real, measurable outcomes, focused on improving student performance, enhancing student wellbeing, and creating a strong and sustainable teaching workforce. The Better and Fairer Schools Agreement reflects this commitment to reform and sets out to close the educational and equity gaps that have held back so many public school kids for so long. As we know, education opens doors, and these reforms will ensure that every student, regardless of their background, has a foundation to build a successful future, because learning just doesn't happen in a vacuum. In today's world, supporting students' wellbeing is also crucial. The pandemic brought new challenges, and we've seen a rise in mental health issues among young students. That's why Labor has invested over $200 million in student wellbeing through the Student Wellbeing Boost. This funding allows every school across the country to support student mental health better, with the flexibility to address the specific needs of their school communities. Schools have used this funding to bring in mental health professionals, run wellbeing programs, and create activities that foster a sense of belonging and engagement. Our approach to wellbeing ensures that no student's mental health is overlooked. We know that when students are emotionally supported, they're more prepared to engage academically. This investment in student wellbeing is a direct response to the mental health challenges young Australians face today, making sure they have the support at school that they need to thrive. A strong education system also requires a strong workforce. Unfortunately, Australia has been facing a teacher shortage, an issue that's been growing over the past 10 years. Our government is addressing this challenge head-on through the National Teacher Workforce Action Plan. It includes a $159 million investment for 4,000 additional university places in education, a $30 million teacher workload reduction fund, and $56 million in scholarships designed to attract passionate individuals to the profession. These initiatives are creating a stronger and more sustainable workforce. We're not only focused on attracting new teachers, but also on supporting those already in the classroom. This plan provides teachers with high-quality professional learning, eases their workload, and equips them with the tools they need to succeed in the classroom. Retaining experienced teachers and encouraging new ones to the field are essential to our strong education system, and our plan is crucial to achieving that. Our commitment to education also includes the very environments in which they learn, with $285 million allocated through the Schools Upgrade Fund to invest in critical school infrastructure. And in Bennelong, schools like Eastwood Heights Public School, Ryde Public School and West Ryde Public School have received upgrades to outdoor learning spaces, shade structures and more, creating comfortable, safe environments for students to learn and grow. Deputy Speaker, on this side, we want our public schools to be the best they can be. What we've delivered, plus our record funding arrangements on the table, show that federal Labor is serious about addressing the funding imbalance in public schools in Bennelong and right across the country.
There being no further speakers, the debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting. And I call the clerk.
Private members' business, notice number 3, motion relating to paraquat and diquat usage.
I call the member for Mallee.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move the motion relating to paraquat and diquat usage in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper. I am proud to move this motion, standing up for our farmers and the critically important work they do to provide food security to our nation and to feed the growing global population, now exceeding 8 billion people. Paragraph 4 of this motion points to current comparable regulatory practice and evidence that there is no link between paraquat, diquat and other herbicides, and the risk of illnesses such as Parkinson's disease. Even so, nobody should interpret this motion as rejecting what the science may show or prove in the future. I fully empathise with those that suffer neurological conditions. They are debilitating and horrific, and this motion today, in this motion, I do not wish to diminish their suffering or the cause of it in their illness. Today's motion is about the practice and science today, not what might once have been. Paragraph 2 of this motion takes issue with the sensationalism of the ABC, portrayed on ABC Landline, a program that farmers have trusted for generations. The suggestion that historical practices are still occurring today. Children are not being exposed to herbicides in the way the recent ABC Landline program suggested, and farmers now apply herbicides in protected environments that are safe, with virtually no exposure to the chemicals. The fact that the APVMA took the rare step of responding to ABC Landline's misrepresentations of the reality on this topic demonstrates the severity of that misinformation spread by the public broadcaster. I commend the APVMA for correcting the record. I also want to make clear that the Coalition supports the independence and evidence-based approach to policy at the APVMA. This motion in paragraph 5B makes that abundantly clear. Trust the science. Don't trust sensationalist and frankly disappointing reporting or vested interests pushing for an outcome. We trust the APVMA to come to the right conclusion, but the misinformation being spread about modern paraquat and diquat practices must be countered in this place, lest the decision makers labour under the misapprehension that nobody here takes issue with claims that go close to slandering our farmers. Naturally, the Nationals are quick to their feet when our farmers are potentially slandered. My Nationals colleagues and I, who are speaking on this motion, represent electorates with farmers who rely on paraquat and diquat to operate in both an environmentally friendly and financially viable way. That's the irony in what has been proposed by would-be environmentalists in this debate. By seeking to reduce herbicide usage, activists risk farmers being forced to one or two unpalatable outcomes. Firstly, they may have to revert to heavy tillage farming. Secondly, in the alternative, they may have to cease farming, and then who will maintain the land and prevent the prevalence of weeds or other pests on those properties? One might also ask, who is going to feed the nation? The current usage rate of paraquat is around 1,200 to 1,800 millilitres to the hectare, but as my constituent Ron Hards from Werribee told me, if the rate is reduced to, say, 400 millilitres to the hectare, and I quote, "You may as well pee in the corner of the paddock, it does nothing." Worse still, as Ron points out, at the low dosages, policymakers will effectively be promoting weed resistance to herbicides. Paraquat and diquat have been used safely for 30 years and are presently used to knock down weeds, weakened first with the application of Roundup herbicide. Without paraquat and diquat, my hometown of Mildura will once again be blanketed in dust storms. Even those Labor and Teal MPs might want to explain to their voters why they would want dust storms over Sydney again. That's what will happen if farmers are forced to stay viable by returning to heavy tillage farming, if paraquat and diquat are removed. I commend Grain Producers Australia and Mallee constituents like Andrew Wiedemann, Ron Hards and a great many more who have spoken with me privately, gathering the evidence, gravely concerned about the ABC's misrepresentation of the reality of grain-producing farming, deeply concerned that activists will yet again have another win, which will mean severe loss for Australian farmers. Make no mistake, an unworkable APVMA ruling will sit at Labor's feet.
Is there a seconder for the motion?
I second the member for Mallee's motion, and I reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Member for Riverina. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Lyons.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. As the member for Tasmania's largest rural electorate, I take a keen interest in the matters the member for Mallee has brought forward today. Before any agricultural and veterinary products can be sold or used in Australia, they are evaluated and registered by the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority, APVA, an independent regulatory body responsible for ensuring the safety, efficacy and environmental impact of such products. This process includes paraquat and diquat, which are widely used herbicides in grain and horticulture farming. The APVA recently reviewed paraquat and has proposed removing support for certain high-rate uses due to its potential as an environmental risk and insufficient mitigation of acute poisoning risks. The APMA's proposed decision, released on 30 July, sets out which uses of paraquat can remain acceptable, specifically at lower rates and early in the season. These proposed restrictions align with best practice to protect our environment and, importantly, our users, which of course are our farmers. The APMA examined a wide range of epidemiological studies, including concerns about paraquat's potential link to Parkinson's disease, which of course was the subject of the ABC report that the member for Mallee refers to. After thorough evaluation, both the APMA and the United States Environmental Protection Agency have found no robust association between paraquat exposure and Parkinson's, reassuring the public that these findings are grounded in scientific evidence. It's important, Deputy Speaker, to note that the APMA operates as an independent body. Its decisions are based on evidence. Government officials and elected representatives cannot and should not seek to influence such regulatory decisions which are founded in science. Deputy Speaker, I'm going to take the opportunity to, while we're speaking about the APMA, to highlight some of the systemic challenges that it has faced as an organisation in recent years. A 2023 review found that some chemical reviews by the organisation had taken decades to resolve. The roots of those delays can be traced back to the decisions of the former Liberal National Government. Of course, there was also the forced move of AFMA in 2016 to the city of Armidale, in the electorate of New England, the seat of the then Agriculture Minister, Barnaby Joyce. This move significantly disrupted AFMA's operations, led to severe staffing upheaval, including a shortage of technical experts, and a decline in regulatory efficiency and quality, as highlighted in both the 2019 independent review of the pesticides and veterinary medicines regulatory system and the 2023 review. Despite these findings, the former government failed to act. It sat on critical reports, allowing inefficiencies and staffing shortages to persist. The combination of the upheaval of the forced relocation and the delayed response to the impact smashed the AFMA's ability to fulfil its purpose. It has been left to the Albanese government to pick up the pieces and fix the mess left behind by a decade of Liberal and national incompetence and neglect. And that's a familiar refrain across so many portfolios. In April, the Albanese government outlined our preliminary response to the rapid evaluation of the AFMA, detailing the reforms necessary to restore confidence in this essential regulator. A critical step was the appointment of Scott Hansen as new board chair and CEO in July, installing the experienced leadership needed to make the AFMA a world-class chemical regulator. We have removed the requirement for AFMA staff to be based at Armidale, allowing the organisation to recruit based on expertise rather than geography. This change improves operational efficiency and enhances the agency's ability to fulfil its regulatory responsibilities. And let's be clear, for the record, the AFMA's role is to regulate the sector across all of Australia, not to shore up a local jobs message for the member for New England in a city in his electorate. Throughout the reform process, the AFMA will continue to exercise its regulatory powers to address outstanding chemical reviews and will keep the Minister informed with regular updates. And, of course, the member for Mallee had a bit of a sledge at the ABC. I reject that entirely. I don't agree with everything the ABC does, but I respect its right to act independently and make its own editorial judgments. Thank you.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Riverina.
My late father, Lance, left school after his primary years and went straight to the farm. And I can remember when I came along and Dad took me up the paddock and we used to pour chemicals and liquids into water in the boom spray, and then make sure we did everything we could to get the highest yield. He probably didn't take all the necessary measures because they weren't in place at the time, and he just didn't know what he didn't know. And of course, these days farming is a lot different. Farmers kit up properly when mixing chemicals. They do everything they can and place safety first. Well, my father placed safety first too, but times were different. Times were way different. We certainly didn't get the yields then that we are getting now, and we are getting the yields now from grain because of the wonderful steps we've taken in technology and science, and we thank the universities, we thank our farmers for what they've done to increase production, and we should thank our farmers 3 times a day, every day. Every time we tuck our knees under the table to eat, we should be applauding and lauding our farmers' work. Our farmers are the best in the world. They're the best environmentalists in the world, and what they don't need is more regulation. What they don't need is somebody coming down on top of them and telling them that they've got to dilute this and got to dilute that, because what will happen if we go down the path that some are suggesting is that we will make the various chemicals and substances we use to gain higher yields, we will make those chemicals, we'll make what we're spraying out almost weed, the weeds will be resistant to them. And we can't have that. This is a very good motion, and it wouldn't be brought forward by no less than the Shadow Assistant Minister for Regional Health if it weren't a good cause. Now, paraquat and diquat have been used safely for more than 3 decades. They're presently used to knock down weeds weakened first with an application of Roundup herbicide. And I appreciate the ABC has gone out on a limb on this, And sometimes we see our national broadcaster do these sorts of things in this sort of way and then use Country Hour and Landline to push it and promote it. But even the member for Lyons just said that as it stands, based on current evidence, there is no link whatsoever between paraquat and Parkinson's disease, but there is an obligation to listen to the science if such evidence presents itself. There is. And the member for Mallee understands that. She grasps it. She has a history of making sure that the people she represents come first. And this is why she has brought this important motion to the Parliament. It is important that farmers adhere to the safety precautions when using any herbicides. My father did it in his own sort of way. I know the member for Parkes, a farmer of many decades' experience, also does. When used within these guidelines, any risks associated are reduced. Now, the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry must listen to all farmers on this issue, not just those from perhaps a show broadcast on ABC or a radio program. We saw what happened last time Labor did this with the live cattle, and in a knee-jerk response to a program in June 2011, I remember it well, we just cut the cattle trade. We didn't tell Indonesia at the time, but they found out later. But we cut the cattle trade. It was the worst decision in agriculture, worst decision up until they decided to stop live sheep. Now, this is an attack on farmers. Make no mistake, it always is. It's an attack on those people who produce the finest food and the best fibre in all of the world. Exactly. These decisions need to be made holistically, taking in the evidence from farmers, the science, most importantly the science, and weighing up the risks and benefits to primary producers and how it would affect the production of the top quality food and fibre I mentioned, for which I also mentioned Australia is renowned. Now, the APVMA, the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority, is reviewing the approved usage levels of paraquat and diquat in Australia, and that is eminently and perfectly sensible. Let's leave it to the experts. Let's not leave it to the ABC. Let's not leave it to Labor trying to score political points. Let's leave it to the experts. Let's make sure we put every provision in place for our farmers to increase their yields, to do what they've always done in the best possible way, and not rush to stupid, knee-jerk, meaningless responsibility, the only benefit of which and the only winners of which will be our weeds.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Moreton.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and it's encouraging to see the member for Mallee's wholehearted support for the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority, and the member for Riverina also giving support for it as well. I commend their stance, but it is a little bit surprising given the record of the coalition when it comes to this independent arm's-length regulator. The Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicine Authority, established in 1993 to centralise the registration of all agricultural and veterinary chemical products in the Australian marketplace. The chemical registration process rests on a rigorous scientific evaluation of the safety and efficacy of a chemical to protect the health and safety of people, animals, the environment and trading relationships. Scientists serving the nation. Scientists saving lives. Scientists doing science. Billy Hughes was still a Labor PM when he set up the precursor to the CSIRO way back in 1916. He did go on to serve 5 other parties, but I would note, never the National Party. But the Labor Party has always had that strong connection with the bush and with science. We believe that it's vital to value and uphold the role of all independent agencies, especially scientific ones. You don't want politicians making scientific decisions. This means letting them get on with their job of interpreting the science without undue influence and then listening to their expert findings. The APVMA is no different, and the Albanese Labor government is taking steps to bolster confidence in it after years of some frankly quite bizarre interference under the coalition government. First, there was the ill-thought-out and ill-planned move of the APVMA to Armidale in the electorate of New England, I think it was, New England. This measure was designed and implemented by the member for New England for his own bizarre personal reasons. First, he ordered a cost-benefit analysis of the move. Then he decided to ignore that process. He did not wait for the report or consult industry, and then he moved the APVMA anyway. In fact, there was intense industry opposition to this move, led by the National Farmers Federation and CropLife. Surprise, surprise, the National Party member ignoring the farmers. Maybe because he was an accountant, I don't know. When the cost-benefit analysis was finally released, no, we give him to New South Wales. We give him to New South Wales. Brief interaction with St George. I thank the member for that interjection. So the cost-benefit analysis, when it was finally released, warned that the move could delay investigation and approval processes, adversely affecting the industry. It also cautioned against the loss of regulatory scientists, the experts responsible for the critical work, foreshadowing how this would affect the ability of the agency to meet its KPIs. By May 2023, the staffing crisis within the agency was actually raised in estimates. It's not like the former government did not know there were problems. The former Agriculture Minister commissioned a report into the regulatory system in September 2019 and then sat on that report for a year without taking any action. It's taken a Labor government to step in and resolve these issues. Labor helping the bush because we govern without fear or favour. We appointed a new board chair and CEO to provide the leadership required to revitalise and reform the APVMA so it can continue to serve farmers, like the honourable member opposite. We also removed the requirement that staff be Armidale-based, therefore attracting high-quality candidates from further afield, and not just hiring because their postcode happened to be 2530 smack bang in the middle of the New England electorate. The 2023 Clayton Utes Review of the APVMA noted that some reviews for chemicals were subject to decades of delay. In response, the Minister for Agriculture issued a ministerial direction to resolve outstanding reviews, and significant progress has been made. Letting the APVMA get on with its job is precisely what this Labor government is doing when it comes to the herbicides paraquat and diclat. These chemicals are used to manage weeds in grain and other horticultural farming and have been under review by the APVMA. As a result, the APVMA proposes to apply some limitations to the use, including at higher rates of application that have been an unacceptable level of risk to the environment and the people around that environment, obviously, or when poisoning risk is not adequately mitigated. The proposed regulatory decision was released on the 30th of July this year and still allows usage at lower rates and early in the season. Public consultation will ended on the 29th of October. This proposal has received support from the interim CEO of Grain Producers Australia, who agree with the measures to tighten rules around the safe handling.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call a member for Parkes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I too stand here to support the member for Mallee and support her motion into this House. And I acknowledge that with the members opposite in the Labor Party, they are in fierce agreement, but they can't resist the temptation to throw a political spin into what's a very common sense motion. I do speak with some practical experience in the use of paraquat. In my previous role as a grain farmer, we would use that as what's known as a double knock. The glyphosate would take out a lot of the weeds. The hard-to-kill ones would need another application of paraquat to finish them up. And people go, oh, you're using chemicals. The reason at this moment, as we speak, right across Western New South Wales is one of the biggest wheat crops ever harvested, ever on record, is because of the techniques of growing wheat in Western New South Wales, and that's using no-till, zero-till. Exactly. Not ploughing, not cultivating, just preserving the trash from the previous crop on top of the ground, reflects the light, reflects the heat, conserves the moisture. We hear a lot of talk in this place about carbon farming and sort of funky phrases about what's all the go. The farmers in my electorate have been doing this for decades. They pioneered this process. And so I too heard, the ABC didn't just play this once. I must have been in the car, I think it was last week, travelling around my electorate. I think I heard the first report on this, and the same gentleman quoted, I think, between 6 and 6:30 in the morning, between 12 and 1. Then it was on the afternoon show about 4 in the afternoon. So 3 times in the one day, they redid this. And I've got great sympathy for the gentleman they interviewed that has Parkinson's, that believes that the use of this chemical might have led to it. But he also said how he was soaked in this chemical. Look, Deputy Speaker, if you soaked yourself every day in petrol, you probably wouldn't be all that healthy. We're not banning petrol. If mechanics tipped battery acid over their head while they were installing batteries in the cars, probably wouldn't do them much good either, but we're not banning batteries. This is the same. When I use paraquat, rubber gloves, long sleeve shirt, towed by a tractor with a carbon filtered cab, everything as per the recommendation. And if you follow those recommendations, it is a safe chemical to use. It's an essential one. And we need to make sure we don't have these knee-jerk reactions from people on the fringes of things that tend to want to do things to make others change what they're doing. There's been a lot of defence on the APVMA, a lot of discussion about the history. I can say the APVMA can lift their act, and this is not the only issue that's been bubbling along for some time. For the last 12 months or so, I've been talking with some farmers and suppliers in my electorate about a seed treatment called Victrado. Now, Victrado, in the trials, the significant trials that have been done by Syngenta with the local firm McGregor Goulet, over 5 years have shown considerable improvement in yield potential by controlling crown rot. Crown rot is a very, very, I guess, insidious issue with wheat that largely becomes unknown until the crop's nearly mature, and then the yield just falls away. Now, they've been waiting for an outcome from the APVMA, hoping that in this year they could have used it. That's not happening. They thought next year in the 25 season, and it looks like that's been pushed out because they are concerned about the lack of efficacy, not about potential environmental impacts. It's about the efficacy. My point is, why not let the market decide whether this chemical works or not? If it's not going to have any ill effects and it's only the efficacy that's an issue, this should be dealt with. So the APVMA does have an issue of dragging its feet in places where it's not necessary. I'm not saying we take shortcuts. I'm not saying that chemicals shouldn't be properly scrutinised, but there is no need to drag things out unnecessarily when it's affecting the viability and the potential profitability of farmers in Australia. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call a member for Spence.
Well, thank you, Speaker. Governments have a duty to protect farmers and the agricultural sector, not just economically, given the value Australian farming has to local communities and the wider nation, and I'll touch on that later, but physically. Like all Australian workers, farmers on the land must work in the safest possible conditions. This is something a Labor government will never shy away from, and it should be an objective for those opposite, who are in large part representatives of more regional and agricultural-centric communities. I would expect members of the opposition to agree with me on this subject, and I would also expect those members, such as the member for Mallee, to acknowledge that when new evidence is found regarding the impact of certain chemicals, it's taken into consideration constructively, then scrutinised, and finally actioned accordingly by regulatory bodies. In the motion, the member for Mallee at least touches on the important role these authorities play for our nation. In this case, the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority, and rightly so. This body performs critical work to ensure the chemicals used by our farmers, those that are employed each and every day to help ensure food continues to end up on Australian tables, are safe to use. Whether that's by mandating certain practices with chemical substances or by introducing restrictions on a product's use. These efforts go a long way toward limiting potential health risks within Australian agriculture. The significance of this role can't be understated, and it's important that public faith, both inside the agricultural sector and beyond, is maintained by the APVMA, so that it can continue to make these important decisions. Unfortunately, that faith was undermined under the watch of those opposite, so much so that it led to a strategic review of the body. That review recommended significant changes, And once again, it's up to this Labor government to clean up nearly a decade of neglect under the previous Liberal administration. Because under that old government, a report to review the regulatory framework behind AgVet chemicals, which include paraquat and diquat, was first authorised. And what was the outcome of this review, I hear you ask? Well, nothing, because those opposite chose to sit on that report for over a year without taking any action on its recommendations. The opposition must appreciate the work the Labor government is doing, having chosen to leave so much work to be done during its administration for our government to tidy up later. It's flattering, if not a little disappointing, but I digress. It's imperative that confidence is restored in the APVMA, and we're getting on with that task, having taken important steps towards its reform. Likewise, the APVMA is getting on with its role too, having recently proposed additional regulatory action on the use of paraquat and diquat, which was open for public consultation and submissions until last week. And submitted as part of that consultation are the views of neurologists and other doctors who believe there is a link between these chemicals and the development of Parkinson's disease. Regardless of our thoughts on them as legislators, taking in views such as these represents a core process of the APVMA, especially as they're an independent agency. The body is also, as the member for Mallee's motion seeks to promote, listening to the voices of farmers across the country who are having their say on that submission process as well. This is happening as I speak, and it's something I'd expect the member for Mallee to appreciate given her motion. But unfortunately, the honourable member doesn't see it that way, having come to her own scientific conclusions, refusing to let the APVMA to do the work required, and dismissing other points of view as sensationalist, choosing to weaponise media reports the member disagrees with. It's a shame, because using a regulatory process solely to attack the ABC does nothing to help farmers waiting for the final decision on the proposed changes. And it certainly doesn't display a willingness to listen to science either. Processes like these allow for scrutiny, research and analysis from both public and academic levels to make informed decisions to protecting an Aussie's well-being. The member for Mallee, with a motion like this, goes around that process and wants to apply her own ideas away from that scrutiny. This is worrying behaviour, and worse still, it's been embraced by the opposition wholeheartedly. So I would urge the member for Mallee and her colleagues who continue to apply forms of anti-science like this to consider the impact of their actions and change course. Thank you.
The time allotted for this debate has expired. The debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting, and I call the clerk.
Private members' business. Order of the day number 1 relating to workplace relations.
And I call a member for Layla.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I rise today to talk about wages growth and to talk about the first act of the Albanese Labor government, the Jobs and Skills Summit, because 2 years later, this government has spent the last 2 years following through on the findings of that summit and what drove that summit. The summit's focal topics included keeping unemployment low, boosting productivity and raising incomes, included delivering secure, well-paid jobs and strong, sustainable wages growth. It included expanding employment opportunities for all Australians, including the most disadvantaged, included addressing skills shortages and getting our skills mix right over the longer term, included maximising jobs and opportunities from renewable energy, tackling climate change, the digital economy, the care economy and a future made in Australia, and in ensuring women have equal opportunities and equal pay. In August of 2022, the member for Hawke and I had our own Outer Western Suburbs Jobs and Skills Summit. Our local summit helped to inform the National Jobs and Skills Summit in Canberra on the 1st and 2nd of September in 2022. At both summits, we heard similar information, that the feminised industries, particularly the care economy, were being left behind in terms of wages. That those industries, including childcare and aged care, those opposite would rather us not mention, had bargaining systems so complicated that we saw wages going backwards and reduced productivity and understaffing. And I stand here now, a proud member of the Albanese Labor government, knowing that we are delivering wage increases of up to 15% to aged care workers and early childhood educators and carers. Why? Because the coalition government purposefully kept wages low and allowed enterprise bargaining to collapse so much that only 14% of industries were covered by an agreement, and we experienced a decade of Australians going backwards financially with stagnant wages, particularly in the care economy. Those things have now been addressed, as have the industrial relations legislation, which has seen industries opened up and negotiations being easier for workers to ensure that their wages will continue to grow. After the Jobs and Skills Summit, this government took steps to reinvigorate bargaining with our significant reforms under the Secure Jobs, Better Pay Act. This included enacting the new supported bargaining stream, which has reduced the barriers for low-paid sectors to access the benefits of bargaining, making the Better Off Overall test simpler and fairer, and giving the Fair Work Commission more power to arbitrate and to resolve intractable bargaining. Because of this government, there are now 500,000 more Australian workers covered by current enterprise agreements. This is boosting wages and boosting workplace conditions. To put it bluntly, Deputy Speaker, when the Labor government say they're going to do something, they do it. As an election commitment, the Albanese government said that it would prioritise addressing the cost of living crisis with well thought out and practical measures, and that is what we've done. In less than a full term, we've successfully turned a decade of coalition government deficits into Labor surpluses. We've ensured wages growth. We've got the gender pay gap down to 11%, the lowest it has ever been. This is a government that I am proud to be a part of. A government committed to increasing wages, to tackling inflation, and to ensuring that unemployment doesn't rise. Carefully planned, carefully implemented legislation brought to this place, one step at a time, delivering on the commitments that we made on taking government and delivering on the things that we found on the Skills and Employment Summit. Thank you.
Question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call a member for Hughes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on this motion in relation to the Labor government's workplace relations policies. And I note, Deputy Speaker, that it was originally going to be moved in the name of the Honourable Member for Werriwa, and the Honourable Member of Werriwa for Werriwa does, of course, represent the electorate in Sydney South, Deputy Speaker. And after the next election, following the Electoral Commissioner's redistributions, suburbs of Glenfield, Bardia, Macquarie Links, Macquarie Fields and Long Point will be within my electorate of Hughes. The suburb of Ingleburn, currently within the electorate of Macarthur, will similarly be moved into Hughes. And I look forward to it, Deputy Speaker, if I am re-elected, to serving and representing those constituents, as my seat will then be firmly southern and southwest Sydney. For those in southwest Sydney, indeed throughout the entirety of our nation, the role the federal government plays in workplace relations is critical. It is critical to those working in manufacturing, in retail trades, in construction. These are sectors that predominate in southern and southwest Sydney, Deputy Speaker. There are also large numbers of small businesses within my existing electorate and within my new area. Industrial relations policy is top of mind for our small businesses, and they are not happy with this Albanese Labor government. A government that is not the government of Hawke and Keating or even of Whitlam. This is a government, they were governments committed to looking after the so-called working class. Instead, this is a government that has forgotten the economic reforms of Keating and Hawke with the Wages Accord, a system that ensured that wage increases were linked to productivity, giving prosperity to Australians. Despite his PhD in Keatingism, this Treasurer does not understand that, and the Minister for Industrial Relations understands it even less. Deputy Speaker, take for example the manufacturing sector. The manufacturing sector plays a crucial role in the Australian economy. During COVID, it contributed 6.2% to the GDP. Imagine what it's doing now outside of COVID. It supports more than 862,000 jobs. The manufacturing industry in Australia is made up of nearly 104,000 businesses. Food manufacturing, for example, is the leading industry in the manufacturing industry, with 18 companies in the top 100 manufacturing companies. The total output of the manufacturing industry for Australia in 2020 was $319 billion. However, this is an industry that has been largely ignored by the Albanese Labor government. Last week, I met with the Southern Strength Agile Manufacturing Network. This is a group of manufacturers, Deputy Speaker, that are working together to ensure the long-term viability of the manufacturing sector. They spoke to me of the workplace shortages throughout the sector, especially in the trades. Boilermakers, fitters and turners, welders, tool makers, structural steel workers, packers, metal fitters and machinists, maintenance technicians, and of course electricians, plumbers and pipe fittings. Where is the Labor's plan to address the shortage of manufacturing workers? The Labor government's workplace relations legislation does nothing to address the critical trades shortage that Australia currently has and that is on a trajectory to become a national crisis. Then we turn to the retail trades. Throughout my electorate, as a result of many factors, including the cost of living crisis brought on by this government, we have many vacant shop fronts. For the first time in my memory, we have spaces vacant in suburbs like Sutherland and Engadine for months on end. In Sutherland, in the last 2 years I have been elected, 2 of the 3 beautiful local homewares and gift stores have had to close. The Little Dream Co at Sutherland remains a beautiful independent retailer with the most wonderful children's books, clothes and toys. However, she is now the sole trader in that space. The retail trades have been savaged by the Labor government's policies, including workplace relations. And now, Deputy Speaker, the construction industry. The National Electrical and Communications Association has spoken about the chronic shortage of trades within this sector, the chronic shortage of electricians. We need at least another 85,000 by the end of 2050. Deputy Speaker, this government has no plan on workplace relations to address the critical shortages that our country is facing.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Gilmore.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, I have been pleasantly surprised to see the growing confidence in both the aged care and childcare industries in my electorate of Gilmore following wage increases in both sectors. Whether it's caring for our youngest citizens or our oldest, the Albanese government is supporting those who play a vital role in our community with a much-deserved pay increase. I have visited many childcare centres in my electorate over the past few months, and the management, staff and families were thrilled about this government's decision to fund a 15% increase for early childhood educators. Not only has it provided a boost for existing employees, this pay rise has made the childcare sector more attractive for school leavers and those seeking work in an industry that is shaping the next generation of Australians. Since the announcements, I've started seeing new childcare centres popping up in my electorate, which is fabulous because many families struggle to secure a place for their children. In Gilmore, we need more childcare providers, and this pay rise means more staff, more job security, more centres and ultimately more places for our little people. The ECTAR Clipper Road Early Education and Care Service in East Nowra welcomed the pay rise, with the CEO, Anita Kumar, explaining how difficult it had been to attract and retain staff in an often challenging environment. The majority of the young children in care at Clipper Road are from disadvantaged backgrounds, and the wonderful staff are exhausted by the end of the day. Anita said the pay increase was well deserved by her passionate team, and she is confident it will help attract additional staff, which means the centre can stay open longer, therefore helping local families in need. It was also great to see the Little Zach's Academy recently open its doors in Bomaderry, with a second centre soon to open in Kiama. New childcare centres are also on the drawing board for Ulladulla, Sussex Inlet, North Nowra and Central Nowra, which is just fantastic. I'm seeing a similar scenario playing out in aged care. In the electorate with the second highest number of aged care pensioners in the country, aged care workers are in demand. The Albanese government's investment of $3.8 billion over 4 years to support the aged care sector has given providers more confidence. The 15% wage increase for aged care workers makes this important industry more attractive for workers needing the financial security to buy their own homes. Funding pay rises for aged care workers of up to 28% for workers from 1 January 2025 will facilitate the delivery of a higher standard of care for older Australians. Deputy Speaker, Labor's workplace reforms are delivering secure jobs and better pay, which is providing cost of living relief. In the 2 years until May 2024, average weekly earnings have increased by $153.60 per week, compared to only $55.90 per week over the 2 years prior to May 2022, when the Coalition was in office. In the June 2024 quarter, I'm pleased to say we've seen a wage price index growth of 4.1%, the second largest annual growth rate since December 2009. The WPI has been equal to or above 4% for the last 4 quarters, which has not occurred since Labor was last in government. Under the Albanese government in the year to June 2024, we've seen the highest wage increases in the healthcare and social assistance sectors, education and training industry, and electricity, gas, water and waste services. Since coming to government, we have seen strong nominal wage growth and weakening inflation, which has resulted in real wage growth returning, thanks to our workplace relations reforms and responsible economic management. We have gone into bat for low-paid workers with a national minimum wage increase 3 times in 3 years. That's an extra $103.30 per week in the pockets of full-time employees. We have advocated for wage increases and have taken steps to reinvigorate bargaining with our significant reforms under the Secure Jobs Better Pay Act. These changes mean that almost 500,000 more workers are now covered by current enterprise agreements, improving conditions and delivering real wage rises. The Albanese government is also supporting women to earn more, and I'm thrilled that in September the female participation rate was at a record high of 63.2%. It's also great news that the gender pay gap is now the lowest on record. The numbers are clear. People are working and earning more, and real wages keep growing under Labor.
The question is that motion be agreed to. I call the member for Longman.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It's been interesting listening to this debate because I thought it was about real wages, and I haven't heard much about real wages. I've heard about gross wages, but not real wages. And, you know, when I'm out there talking to people in my community, you know, that most of the people talk about net wages. And I can remember as a young bloke getting my first paycheck, which was in a little yellow envelope, mustard colour. We can all remember those ugly things, and it had gross pay $104, tax $14, net pay $90. And you ripped it off and you tipped it out and you had some cash. And it was great. And all we cared about was what we got in our hand. We couldn't give a toss what it was before tax. All we cared about was what we're getting in our mitt. But real wages, of course, goes another step, because real wages is about what you get for your money. And I remember talking to a young person a couple of months ago, and they were talking about how tough the cost of living was on their family. And I said, what do you think the solution is? And they said, well, maybe they should put wages up. And I said, yep, you could do that. And I said, let's work it out. So if someone's on 50 grand a year and we gave them another $50 a week, they'll lose $16 of that in tax. I said, so the person who's picking the strawberries at the farm, they get the same pay rise. The person who's driving it from the truck to the depot gets the same pay rise. The forklift driver gets the same pay rise. Then it gets delivered to Woolies and they get the same pay rise, the person unloading it, the person putting it on the shelf does. And all that extra wages, all those extra gross wages, have to be paid for. So you've got two choices when you're in business. If your wages bill goes up, your gross wages bill goes up, then what you've got to do is you've either got to put your prices up, or what you've got to do is you've got to cut your wage bill. It's pretty simple. Pretty simple. And the thing about it is that most people in business, they can't afford to put their wages up because of competition. So what happens is they start to lay people off. That doesn't sound like a win. That doesn't sound like a party that cares about workers. So I would contend, what's the point of getting a pay rise of $50, paying $16 in tax, so you're $34 better off, and your grocery bill and your cost of living goes up $70 a week? That's a net loss of $36. That's a complete waste of time. There is no winners in this whole story. Forget the spin. I can remember talking to my son, and he came to me when he was in his early 20s and he said, "Dad, I don't understand politics and I don't care about it, but I'm trying to figure out who I should vote for." And trying to be pragmatic, Deputy Speaker, and be fair, I said, "Son, you should probably go and look at all the different parties and see what they stand for and vote for what you believe in." And he said, "I don't care about any of that stuff, Dad. It's just for old blokes like you." And I think at the time I was about 43. And he said, "All I know is I seem to have more money in my pocket when the Libs are in, so I'm going to vote for them." And I said, "That sounds like as good a reason as any, son, because that is a stark reality. You can spin this however you like. You can talk about higher wages. We all want more people to earn more. Of course we do. But at what cost? At what cost, I ask the government? For goodness sake, if we're going to keep putting wages up, we are in a global market and we are just becoming more and more and more uncompetitive. That's why it was the coalition who brought out the tax cuts, because we believe that net pay increases is what matters. It doesn't put any burden on the employer. It doesn't add costs to the goods that people are buying. So therefore, their wage increases in real terms makes a difference to them. The way that this government's doing by continuously putting up gross wages it's just not helping the situation at all, and it's got to be stopped. And if they understood economics, if they'd ever been in a business, they would understand that. But the problem is they're trying to do it all from a textbook, and all they're doing is the headline. Now they'll come out and say, "Oh, the member for Longman doesn't want to see people get pay increases." That's rubbish. I want to make sure that people get more and they get more for their money. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see ridiculous headlines that just penalise people and makes them go further into a hole. And that's exactly what your policies are doing. You're destroying the country. People out there are suffering. And I can tell you now, when I go out there and I ask the people in my community, how many of you are better off than you were 3 years ago? The answer is no one. No one. Because you're crippling in this country. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Adelaide.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And Deputy Speaker, I rise to support this motion and congratulate the member for moving such a good motion when it comes to real wage growth. And just listening to the previous member saying that no one's a winner when you have wage growth and increase in wages, well, the winner is the person who's getting more money in their pocket. That's what increase in wages means. It means more money in your pocket. And if you were to listen to the other side over the years and the many years that I've been here and seen the many, many industrial relations policies that have been put forward, whether it be by the coalition or whether by us, with us it's about bettering the industrial relations area in terms of increasing wages and giving people the ability to earn a decent living. On the other side, it's always been about putting pressure downward, ensuring that the wages remain low. And we saw that for the 11 years that they were in government, where it was the lowest wage growth that we've had in the history of this country, where every time that we spoke about increasing wages, the then coalition government opposed it. And in fact, when we went in to support the commissions, to support the increase in lower wages to the commission, they opposed it and said we shouldn't get involved in it. Now, Deputy Speaker, what we need to understand is that we have an economy, and within this economy, people buy and sell, and the majority of people are wage earners. 80% of Australia's population would be wage earners. They need a decent wage to be able to pay their mortgages, to put food on the table, to get kids to school, and to be able to buy consumable goods. That's what keeps our economy going. If we press wages down and ensure that they don't go up, then the economy starts to stop. And you can see it. Anyone that's done 101 of economics knows that the factor is that once people stop buying consumable goods, the economy goes southward. So it's so important to ensure that we have real wage growth, and that's what this government is doing. And since being elected, average weekly earnings increased by 8.7%, or $153.60 per week. And that was 2 years to May 2024, compared to when the Coalition left office, there was only a 3.3% increase per week over the 2 years prior to the May 2022. Deputy Speaker, wage price index growth of 4.1% in the June quarter 2024 was the second largest annual growth rate since December quarter of 2009 of 4.2%. So you can see from 2009 onwards where we were. Deputy Speaker, we need to ensure that we have decent wages, that wages keep pace with our cost of living, and 4% for the last 4 quarters is which has not occurred since Labor was last in government. So there's proof for you. When Labor is government, real wages grow. When we're not in government, they decline and remain at a level that doesn't keep up with the pace of keeping people living with decent wages and proper pay. Deputy Speaker, we've also seen the lowest paid workers in our nation, childcare workers, aged care workers, all receive a big increase. And they're all quite happy about it. The aged care premises that I go to and speak to many, many workers, they tell me how grateful they are for this wage increase. And same with the childcare workers, people that do a really important job, extremely important job with our kids, educating those children at a very early age, so parents can either work while they're being looked after, but also the education that they give. And we can repay that by paying them a decent wage, and that also attracts more people to those industries where we need them so much, where there's such a shortage at this point in those industries. Deputy Speaker, in the short time that I've got left, I just want to make sure that we are aware that over the last 10 years, we had one of the slowest wage growths in the history of this country. And that was because we need to put policies into place to ensure that wages keep up with cost of living and a whole range of other things. But unfortunately, we had a government all those years that basically wanted to keep wages low. Now, some argue in economics that if you keep wages low, it employs more people. As I said, that may be the case for a very short time, but the reality is if people can't buy consumable goods and they can't pay for the things that they require to live day to day, then we're going backwards. And we want to ensure that we go forwards with this government. Thank you.
There being no further speakers, the debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made an order of the day for the next sitting. I call the clerk.
Private members' business, notice number 4 relating to the agriculture sector.
I call the member for Capricornia.
I move the motion relating to the agriculture sector in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper. Thank you. I rise today to move a motion in recognition of our agriculture sector, a cornerstone of Australia's social, economic and environmental sustainability. Agriculture is not just an industry, it's an essential part of who we are as Australians. Our farmers work tirelessly to put food on our tables, contribute to our economy and protect our food security. In the 2023-24 financial year alone, the agriculture sector generated over $82 billion, bolstering our economy and creating jobs. In fact, this sector employs 257,000 Australians, with many working in our rural and regional communities, ensuring that over 90% of our fresh produce is grown right here on Australian soil. However, our farmers are facing an unprecedented challenges due to the actions of this government, which consistently disregards the need of those who keep our food supply stable and affordable. The Albanese government's decision to scrap the dedicated agriculture visa has left a gaping hole in our workforce. Industry leaders have warned of a workforce shortfall of 172,000 people, yet these calls for support have gone unanswered. Instead, Labor has chosen to rely on the Pacific Australia Labour Mobility Scheme, which does not adequately meet the needs of our farmers. Our farmers need workers to keep operations running. This government has left them stranded. This isn't just an issue for farmers, it's an issue for every Australian. Without a secure workforce, our farmers can't produce more, which means supply goes down and prices go up. Every Australian feels the cost of Labor's choices at the checkout. Labor's actions have not only undermined our workforce, but have also compromised Australia's water security. Water is the lifeblood of agriculture, and by cutting over $7 billion from critical water infrastructure projects, Labor is threatening the very foundation of our farming communities. They stripped $483 million from the Urana Dam project in central Queensland, an initiative that would have secured water for farmers across Capricornia. Yet in blatant hypocrisy, they were quick to cut the ribbon on Rookwood Weir, a coalition-funded project. This inconsistency is symbolic of a government that prioritises inner-city voices over the needs of our rural and regional communities. These reckless cuts go beyond budgetary decisions. They're an assault on the entire agriculture supply chain. Every dollar invested in water infrastructure yields enormous benefits, ensuring that our farmers can withstand droughts and changing weather conditions. But by pulling this funding, Labor isn't just jeopardising the livelihoods of farmers, they're threatening the stability of rural communities and the broader Australian economy. Under this government, food prices have risen by 12%, adding even more strain to Australian families. While Labor claims to support Australians struggling with the cost of living, their agriculture policies are doing the opposite. These policies are raising grocery bills for every household in the country, impacting everyone from families in our cities to pensioners in the bush. Our farmers bear the cost of these misguided policies every day, and in turn, so do Australian families. When Australians see their grocery bill, they should be reminded that this government is driving those prices up. Every price increase at the supermarket reflects Labor's misguided policies. Farmers aren't the only ones paying the price. The entire agriculture supply chain, the regional communities that depend on farming, and every hard-working family being hit with higher grocery bills are feeling let down by this government. On September the 10th, 2024, thousands of farmers gathered for the National Ag Rally on the lawns of Parliament House in Canberra. This rally was a powerful display of the sector's frustration with Labor's anti-agriculture agenda. Farmers and communities from across Australia came together, united by a shared message. The Albanese government's policies are hurting those who feed our nation and drive our economy. I stand with our farmers and our agricultural communities in Capricornia and across the nation. Agriculture is not a political bargaining chip. It's the backbone of our nation. It supports families, sustains businesses and fortifies regional Australia. Our farmers have earned our respect and support, and we must ensure that their needs are prioritised, not dismissed. It's time for this government to stop turning its back on agriculture and start recognising the essential role it plays in our prosperity, security and identity. Today I call on this House to acknowledge the importance of Australian agriculture and to reverse the harmful policies that are jeopardising the future of this vital industry. Let's keep farmers farming.
I thank the member. Is the motion seconded?
Second the motion, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Flynn. I call the member for Patterson.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. As the Chair of the House of Representatives Standing Committee on Agriculture, I know the work that goes on in Australian agriculture. It is a great honour to be chair of such a valuable committee in this place, and it not only gives us great insight into agriculture, but we get the opportunity to meet with many farmers, many peak agricultural groups, and talk through issues that are really important to them. Not only am I proud to chair the Agriculture Committee, but I also married the son of a farmer, and we have maintained the friendships from his farming upbringing over years and years. So it's not only as a politician that I get to talk to farmers, but I have a lot of farming friends, and they're a fantastic source of information about really what's going on in Australian agriculture. The other aspect of my exposure to farmers is my electorate. I have this incredible electorate where we have a broad base of people who still farm. And not only land-based farming, but also fishing and oysters too. Dairy cattle farming, beef farming, we even grow turf in my neck of the woods. I know how passionate Australian farmers are and how hard they work, not just in my fantastic electorate of Paterson, but right across this broad and incredible country. And some of the country is indeed difficult. It's been a terrific season, but we all know that we're only a couple of months often away from a dry summer that can change things. In the viticulture industry, you can be at one frost away from losing everything, and that's happened too. In Australia, the gross value of agricultural production is forecast to rise by 3.7 billion to 86.2 billion in 24-25. It's 92.1 billion if you include fisheries and forestry production. It's the third highest result on record. So, whilst those across the aisle want to spread fear, we know that our agricultural industry is growing. The facts just don't lie. It puts us well on track to meet the industry targets of $100 billion by 2030. And we want to support our farmers. We want to support our entire ag sector to get to that $100 billion target by 2030. And we're on track to do it. According to the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestries, 72% of our agricultural production is exported, and that's a magnificent thing. And again, speaking from experience, we spent nearly 12 months last year doing a report on food security in Australia, and we also looked at how we help secure food for our neighbours. This is a great thing, with our major products being sugar beef, lamb, rice and canola to nations like China, Japan, Indonesia and the United States of America. We are doing a fantastic job in this country of not only feeding our own people, but helping to feed the rest of the world. The Australian Bureau of Agricultural and Resource Economics prepared a report that detailed how governments should examine to resolve the tensions that have been emerging in the industry as our economy modernises, as it decarbonises. And we know that we've got very progressive farmers in Australia. They're the cutting edge. They embrace technology like no other nation. They know what's going on in their industry, and they know in our government they have people that want to listen and want to help them produce more food and fibre, not only, as I said, for our country, but for the rest of the world. We're working to ensure that this industry remains contemporary and vibrant and can continue to access skills. And there's been a lot of commentary around labour. We opened the first Jobs and Skills Council of Agribusiness that will work through the challenges facing the industry now and into the future. We've also invested in free fee TAFE that's supported over 20,000 students gain agricultural industry skills. So we are putting the money where it needs to go in terms of agriculture. We know we need more people working in the field, and we're doing that. And it extends beyond the farm and ag sector. We know that our grocery stores are a place of great consternation often for farmers, and that's why we're putting policies in place through the ACCC, looking at the mandatory code of conduct to ensure that our farmers do get a fair price, and so do consumers at Australian stores. Couldn't be prouder of the work we're doing in ag. Thanks.
Question is, that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Flynn.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I am a farmer and grazier, and I'm very pleased to second this motion moved by my colleague here, the member for Capricornia, that acknowledges that agriculture is the cornerstone of Australian social, economic and environmental sustainability, and it plays an essential role in our nation's prosperity. In the 23-24 financial year, the agricultural sector generated over $82 billion, driving Australia's economy forward. The agricultural sector employs 257,000 Australians, and over 90% of fresh fruit, vegetables, meat, milk, eggs available in Australia are produced locally, safeguarding our nation's food security. Deputy Speaker, the hard-working men and women of Central Queensland and the Wide Bay have a strong history of feeding this nation. whether it's beef from Prosperton, citrus from Mundubbera, sugar cane from Gin, eggs from Mount Morgan, milk from the Boyne Valley, wheat from the Central Highlands, or sorghum from the Troom district in central Queensland and Wide Bay, has a thriving agricultural industry. According to Queensland Government's Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, Queensland's contribution to the national economy in 22-23 included 96% of sugarcane, 67% of grain sorghum, 33% of cotton, 94% of bananas, 70% of macadamias, 70% of sweet corn, 65% of avocados, 58% of lemons and limes, 53% of fresh beans, 53% of capsicums, and 50% of mandarins and mangoes, and 48% of the national cattle herd. Deputy Speaker, the motion further notes that the Australian agricultural sector is facing increased pressure due to this government's destructive actions. The government's decision to scrap the dedicated agricultural visa has left the industry with severe and widespread workforce shortages. Australia's water security is being jeopardised by this federal government's reckless slashing of over $7 billion from critical water infrastructure projects. This government has misguided agricultural policies, have driven food prices up by nearly 12%, piling on even more financial strain on everyday Australians. Central Queensland and Wide Bay has felt the brunt of anti-farming policies, both state and federal Labor governments, including the introduction of vegetation and reef legislation laws that essentially took away farmers and graziers' rights to manage their own land. 2.5 years of this Labor government has felt like a lifetime for Central Queensland and Wide Bay's agricultural industry. Labor recently proposed a biosecurity tax onto Australian farmers. This levy was proposed to charge Australian farmers for the biosecurity costs of importers. That is probably one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard, and says a lot considering that this proposal by the Labor government. I mean, why would Australian government tax their own farmers to pay for foreigners to bring products into this country? Ultimately, if the legislation was passed, it would have meant that farmers would be forced to pass on costs, which would have meant families would have to spend more on their fresh food produce. I'm proud of the Nationals, farmers and industry successfully helping scrap this tax after months of campaigning, which was due to be implemented from July 1, 2024. Labor's fresh food tax would have hurt families at the checkout, as well as 84 agricultural commodities, which face taxes to raise $150 million over 3 years. Furthermore, we've seen this Labor government cut vital water infrastructure funding. The decision to slash funding to restore the Paradise Dam in the North Bundaberg region was a kick in the guts, not only to the Wide Bay area, but the agricultural industry as a whole. The Bundaberg area produces 25% of Australia's fresh food produce and produces hundreds of millions of dollars of agricultural investment, which has been put at risk due to the Labor government's inexcusable decision to slash the funding to restore this vital piece of water infrastructure. We're also seeing this Labor government approve wind and solar projects at the fastest rates in Australian history, and this is to the detriment of the agricultural industry. There are countless so-called renewable projects littering and occupying prime agricultural land, and it is the simple fact that you can't eat wind turbines or solar panels. We've seen successive governments send our manufacturing overseas due to countries like China. Do they want to see us all eating our fruit and vegetables from China as well? Deputy Speaker, agriculture is one of, if not the biggest industry in Central Queensland and the Wide Bay, and it must be supported by both state and federal governments and not hindered so that it can remain sustainable for generations to come.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Moreton.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I thank the member for Capricornia for raising a motion, seconded by the member for Hanrahan. To highlight the importance of the agricultural sector in Australia. You don't grow up the son of a butcher, the grandson of a butcher, the brother of two butchers, and even the nephew of a butcher in the Boulogne Shire, growing up in the Boulogne Shire, famous for sheep, cattle, wheat, cotton, grapes, rock melons, without a keen appreciation of the role of farmers and graziers and the role they play in our national economy and all the prosperity that flows. In fact, the first dollar I earned was in a shearing shed, and I also cotton chipped my way through high school, and teachers' college, and even after when I wanted to go backpacking around Europe. So my schoolmates were the sons and daughters of cotton growers and beef cattle farmers, and I still value my connections with people working the land there today, like Ross and Paul Brimblecombe, David Moon, Peter Haslam, and my very good friend Wayne Long, who's still working hard on Billy Knight's property today, who we put out a book together last year. The critical nature of the agricultural sector is also reinforced whenever I visit the Brisbane markets in my electorate of Moreton, the third largest of Australia's 6 central markets. Over 4,500 people work or do business there daily in Rockley at 170 different businesses, fruit and veggie growers, wholesalers, providores, food processors, retailers, independent supermarkets and the food service industry. It's a vital part of South East Queensland's fresh produce supply chain, with an annual trade in excess of 700 million kilograms of produce. That's more than $2 billion worth of fruit and vegetables. No chance that China's going to be taking over that market anytime soon, as I told the member for Hanrahan. Deputy Speaker, the good news is that the outlook for Australia's agricultural sector is very, very positive. The gross value of agricultural production is forecast to rise by 3.7 billion to 86.2 billion in 24-25, the third highest result on record. The Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry cite research from ABARE, which indicates further positive signs for both livestock farmers and crop growers. So Hanrahan's actually been a little bit quieter since Labor came to office. Strong global demand is driving increased production values in livestock and livestock products. Beef sale yard prices are forecast to rise by 29% over 24-25 and lamb sale yard prices by 24% in the same period. This growth is bolstered by increased domestic processing capability and higher export prices, value adding by slaughtering here, giving jobs to Australians. This is mirrored by anticipated crop production values rising despite lower global grain and oilseed prices. In 24-25, winter crop volumes are expected to rise by 17%, thanks to timely rainfall in New South Wales, Queensland and Western Australia. I'm not saying that Labor made it rain, but many are. With figures like, well, weather is a national responsibility. With figures like these, it is understandable that Australia consistently ranks as one of the world's most food-secure nations. We grow about 90% of our own food. An ACIL Allen study highlighted the roles of diversified production, mature supply and delivery chains, and a stable society in bolstering domestic food security and maintaining a vibrant and prosperous export market. A nation of 25 million people produces enough food and fibre for 75 million people. The Albanese Labor government acknowledges the cost of living pressures that Australians are facing at the moment. That's often felt most keenly at the checkout when we buy our fruit and veggies. Labor is committed to ensuring that Australians are paying a fair price for groceries, but also that farmers are receiving what they deserve for their hard work. And in terms of emissions reduction, a fair return for farmers ensures that there is no cultivation wasted. We don't need fruit rotting on the vine or produce being ploughed back into the fields. Labor is taking a range of measures to ease these pressures in the supermarket sector. We've instigated a broad competition reform agenda, which includes funding for Choice to conduct quarterly price monitoring reports, which is particularly appreciated by my electorate of Moreton, finding out where to shop to save a few dollars. We're progressing legislation to implement the biggest change to our merger reform system in almost 50 years. We're directing an additional $30 million in funding to the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission to deal with dodgy practices in the supermarket sector. Much more to be done. Get on board, National Party.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Dawson.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. A federal government has two main jobs. One, to keep their borders secure and their citizens safe, and two, to keep the citizens fed. This Albanese Labor government is failing at both. Agriculture is the cornerstone of Australia's success and should be one of Australia's biggest industries. If you look back through time, agriculture, the production of livestock and fresh produce, allowed millions of residents to live in cities. Think about it. If you live in the heart of Sydney or Melbourne and you go to the shops, Who supplies those apples, that lettuce or broccoli, or that nice, juicy piece of fillet steak? Well, that comes from a farmer. That farmer can sometimes be thousands of kilometres away from you and often has never visited your city. Every day, that farmer continues to ensure that we have Australian fresh produce on our tables. In fact, in 2023 to 24, the agricultural sector generated over $82 billion and they employed over 250,000 Australians. Deputy Speaker, food security should be at the forefront of everyone's mind. 90% of the fresh fruit, vegetables, meat, milk and eggs available in Australia is produced locally. However, the destructive policies from the Albanese Labor government are putting this in jeopardy. The government has shut down the live sheep export, putting hundreds of businesses at risk and increasing their financial stress, all because of politics, not because the market ceased. No. Purely because some crazy idea between Labor, the Greens and the Teals. Then the government imposed a container levy that our farmers have to pay for. Can you believe that? Our farmers must pay for the biosecurity of our international competitors. I shake my head in disbelief. Deputy Speaker, energy prices is one of the biggest issues facing our farmers. Labor's reckless race to renewables is doing absolutely nothing to drive down the energy costs. Just this week, ecological experts are calling for a halt to new large-scale renewable projects. Former Queensland Government Principal Botanist Jeanette Kemp said there will be a considerable backlash if the public was fully aware of the extent of land clearing and fragmentation of valuable habitat to make way for wind farms. It's about time Australia's fully learned the hypocrisy of Labor, the Greens and the Teals. They have brainwashed millions of Australians, including teachers, professors and our younger generation, claiming they are the only ones who care about the environment. Well, it's here in black and white. They are the ones destroying it. They won't allow farmers to clear land to increase their viability, to plant and to grow, but they'll allow clearing for steel structures. It's just bizarre. Life has never been easy under Prime Minister Albanese. Food prices have risen by 12%. There is no water security because of Labor cuts of over $7 billion from critical water projects. The worst part, 34% of Australian vegetable growers are considering leaving the industry. That's within the next 12 months. There is a better way. A coalition government will reinstate the live sheep export trade. We will bring back the ag visa and fix the palm scheme so it's working appropriately and effectively. We will ensure the 88-day backpacker visa remains in place. And we will not introduce a container levy that Australian farmers have to pay for. We will fix the energy crisis in this country by creating a mix of energy sources instead of Labor's reckless race to renewables. We will stop Labor's proposed taxes on superannuation that impact our farmers. The coalition will keep the supermarkets in check by delivering stronger penalties for any competitive behaviour. Deputy Speaker, we've just had an election in Queensland, and what a marvellous result that was for every Queenslander. A Liberal National Party was elected under the leadership of David Crisafulli, and I congratulate the team wholeheartedly. I encourage the Prime Minister to head down to the Governor-General and call for a federal election. Australians have had enough. They've had enough of not feeling safe. They've had enough of crime. They've had enough of sky-high energy prices. They want to be able to afford to build a home. Australians are doing it tough. We need a Liberal national government.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Spence.
Thank you, Speaker. The first half of the member for Capricornia's motion is actually quite sound. Agriculture certainly is of vital importance to Australia, and the sector requires a government that works actively to support it. I say that coming from my own upbringing, having grown up on farms in Mildura, seeing firsthand both the immense work that goes into Australian agriculture, as well as the significant value that comes from those efforts, not just economically,
both locally and across the nation, but also socially. The member for Capricornia would know quite well that the work of farmers and their families build communities from the ground up, and this impact has become a significant piece of the Australian story. My own electorate of Spence, with its own peri-urban localities, is a prime example of the holistic value of agriculture. The Northern Adelaide Plains Food Cluster, which includes areas such as Virginia, Anglevale and Gawler Belt, produces approximately 200,000 tonnes of fresh produce and over $300 million in farm gate value every year. That is a third of South Australia's overall agricultural production, and this cluster has become a valuable community group in itself. It is one that I continue to engage with, and their importance cannot be understated. So the member for Capricornia and I, and indeed all of my Labor colleagues, can definitely agree on the significance of agriculture, which then begs the question, why does the member for Capricornia and the rest of her colleagues proceed to consistently attack policy to support the sector? The member states in the motion that farmers are facing increased pressure due to action taken by the federal government. This simply isn't accurate. In fact, the reality of the situation is quite the opposite. This is a government working to lift pressure from backs of our farmers, regardless of the opposition's refusal to support or even acknowledge these efforts. And it's a shame, because we're delivering much-needed support for the sector, having engaged with a variety of farmers and bodies across Australian agriculture to inform our approach. That includes biosecurity funding totalling more than $1 billion to continue Australia's world-leading record in this space and ensuring the $84 billion agriculture industry continues to grow. It's no accident that Australia remains the only continent free from the avian influenza H5N1, and we've invested another $95 million last month to help keep things that way, further boosting the stability of Australian agriculture. This government is also opening the doors to new trade opportunities across the world in China, India, Thailand, the UAE and more, after a decade of neglect towards our trade relationships by those opposite. As a result, our farmers are now working within the most diversified export market, including 169 countries in the last financial year, in Australian history, achieved under this Labor government. In all, we've delivered over $3 billion of extra funding to the agricultural sector since coming to office in 2022. And better still, it's that funding which is not only throwing much-needed government weight behind farmers when they need it most, but it's working to fight the cost of living across this country, applying downward pressures on food prices in shops by backing farmers on the land and working to improve their productivity. Because we know, as a Labor government, that a healthy agricultural sector in Australia is what helps make fresh produce more affordable when it reaches the consumer. That's why we're committed to helping grow the value of Australian agriculture to $100 billion by 2030, and it's already projected to reach over $86 billion by the end of this financial year. So to link higher food prices in this country, as the member for Capricornia is trying to do, to government support that's been actively delivered to the agricultural sector, it just doesn't stack up. Not only turning Australian agriculture into a numbers game to be won or lost by the opposition, but that notion also works against the interests of farmers, as well as the rest of Australia, given our nation's dependence, both in the regions and in the cities, on their efforts. Because while Labor government is getting on with the job, providing farmers the support needed to weather difficult economic conditions, the opposition is choosing to use those conditions to build a narrative instead of offering solutions to them. Thank the House.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Mallee.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I want to thank my friend and colleague, the member for Capricornia, for moving this important motion. Unfortunately, the time will not permit me to list all the threats to agriculture created by this reckless Albanese Labor government, and I might add their Victorian Labor colleagues. I want to start in my electorate of Mallee. Victorian Labor's renewable energy zones were initially proposed for 5 areas of the state, but now the transmission priority mapping shows Mallee is actually ground zero, along with a small area in my colleague, the Liberal member for Wannon. The VNI West transmission line corridor was announced last week, and some of the farmers in my electorate have voiced their views, and I want to share them because their voices matter in this House, and I'm here to represent them. Glendon Watts, a farmer in Younggroon, said the project hasn't been done correctly. It's a political decision, Mr Watts said. The route does a dogleg into farming land rather than the populated areas. This is almost dictatorial or communism. I don't believe in taking away people's rights to farm or to contest the decision. I don't believe in this project. This isn't Australian to come in and do what they are doing. Billy Baldwin, a sheep and wheat farmer at Marnoon in my electorate, says, we are not going to give it to them. We will have to stand at the gate. The company now plans to get a transmission licence so they can get more power over us, a bigger stick. But to us, it makes no difference. We will be ready to fight. We will protect our community, our home, and our right to farm. Ben Duxton, who has 8,500 merino sheep as well as canola, barley and wheat on his 5,500-acre farm in Kanya Wimmera, whose property could be impacted by about 1.5 kilometres of transmission lines, said he was prepared to go to court over the decision. And I quote, "We know this is no good for Australia. This isn't right for agriculture, food sustainability or food affordability," Mr Duxton said. Once they try and come and put 70% renewables in our farmland, we will never get it back. We are in agriculture country that needs to produce food. We have other energy sources out there. The alternative is nuclear, not ripping up prime agricultural land. None of it is good for food consumers or energy consumers. It just increases the cost in both areas and makes no sense. Grey farmer Jason Barrett, who has sheep, cattle, wheat, barley and canola, said the 1 kilometre line through his property would also restrict the way he can farm. There would be height restrictions, even to the point at time of day, Mr Barrett said. We harvest in summer and there will be temperature restrictions also, not being able to use machinery underneath the lines. We need to farm on warmer days because that's the nature of farming. There is no way we are going to lie down. We are united in our fight. And today I received an email from Anne Bryce, and I want to read you a small amount of that, Deputy Speaker. This is Anne Bryce, who lives in Traynors Lagoon in my electorate. She says, "Never in my lifetime did I ever think I would be facing and fighting against a government that is treating my community with such disdain. The transmission route has been narrowed that it now runs alongside our property. Along with this comes the onslaught of wind turbine companies and now mineral sand mining. We feel we are under constant attack when all we want to do is farm. It's funny how we produce the food, yet we're on the bottom of the food chain because there seems to be so many external factors vying for a piece of our farm. The government, overseas renewable companies and mining all picking at us like crows. We have been fighting this since February 2023, where we have been treated like our lives don't matter by AEMO and Transmission Company Victoria. The mental toll this is taking on my community is immense, and TCV's attitude to this is to give you a card to Lifeline or Beyond Blue. TCV take no accountability. Her family farm has been farming there for 150 years and they are facing this kind of onslaught. Where is food security and ultimately our national security going to end?
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Hunter.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I thank the member for Capricornia for bringing forward this motion. This is a chance to recognise just how crucial agriculture is for Australia's economy, society and environment. Agriculture isn't just another industry, it's a key part of our success and an essential way to our life. In the 2023-2024 financial year alone, Australia's agriculture sector generated over $82 billion supporting economic growth and helping our country remain resilient. It also provided over 257,000 jobs, many in rural and regional areas, just like mine in the Hunter. Deputy Speaker, over 90% of the fresh fruit and vegetables, the meat, the milk and the eggs on the Australian shelves are grown right here. This high level of local production shows the dedication of our farmers and reflects our commitment to food security, ensuring Australians can rely on homegrown food. The cost of living is an ever-present concern for Australians, particularly as food and grocery prices continue to impact household budgets. But this government understands the pressures that rising prices place on families and communities across the nation, and we're committed to ensuring that Australians pay a fair price for their groceries while farmers are fairly compensated for their hard work. Our government has taken the bold step to address the issue that drive up costs at the checkout. Speaker, we recently allocated $2.1 million to the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission to look into the higher electronic payment surcharges which impact Australians in a cashless world. Many Australians face these extra fees on essential purchases and think it's unfair, just like I do. That's why, starting January 1, 2026, we plan to ban debit card surcharges following consultations with the Reserve Bank of Australia. Our goal is clear. We need to reduce costs for consumers without negatively impacting on small business. In October, the Treasurer introduced the biggest reform to Australia's merger laws in 50 years. This change means that mergers, especially in the supermarket industry, will face strong scrutiny from the ACCC to ensure fair prices. This reform is part of our commitment to competition and transparency, so Australians know they aren't being overcharged. We're also tackling shrinkflation, when products shrink in size but stay the same price. Last month we announced changes to the unit pricing code to make sure consumers can compare prices more accurately. There will be stronger penalties for companies who don't follow the code, and the ACCC will start an awareness campaign to help shoppers find the best deals. Additionally, we're holding big supermarkets accountable for misleading pricing. In September this year, the ACCC took legal action against Coles and Woolies for allegedly deceptive discount pricing. This step is part of the extra $30 million we've given the ACCC to address retail sector misconduct, protecting consumers and suppliers alike. In September, we released the ACCC's interim supermarket inquiry report, which raised concerns about supermarket pricing, supplier and treatment, and barriers to competition. With the ACCC's final report due in February, we will have the information needed to create a fairer, more competitive market for all Australians. We're also improving protections for suppliers, particularly small business. The new Code of Conduct, based on recommendations from Dr Craig Emerson's review, will protect suppliers from retaliation with improved dispute processes and a confidential whistleblower system through the ACCC. This step helps make grocery supply chain fairer. Looking forward, we're working with state and territory governments to fix competition barriers in planning and zoning rules, which often allow big players to control large portions of the market, limiting choice and keeping prices high. Reforming these rules is essential for a more competitive and consumer-friendly supermarket sector. Last year we raised penalties for corporations involved in misconduct, increasing them from $10 million to $50 million. With turnover-based penalties going from 10% to 30% of their annual turnover during the breach. The change ensures that the penalties reflect the seriousness of the offence and act as a strong deterrent. Speaker, Australians deserve to know that their government is working hard to protect them from high costs. Through these actions, we're addressing every part of the problem, and from how prices are set to how supermarkets operate. We are committed to fair prices, transparency and protecting consumers. This government will keep strengthening these measures, working towards a grocery sector that offers fair value for consumers, fair pay for farmers and accountability for retailers. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
There being no further speakers, the debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting, and the Federation Chamber is suspended until 4 p.m. this afternoon.